Hello and welcome back to Super Hell, aka the Mystery Spotcast, a show where two recovering Supernatural fans subject themselves to a rewatch so no one else ever has to watch Supernatural again. My name is Ollie. I use any pronouns. You can find me on social media at OllieFresh. It's fresh with a PH.
And my name is Klaudia. My pronouns are she, her, and you can find me on social media at Klaudia Says, K-A-L-U-D-I-A Says. We are mid-season 5.
I feel like this is going to be a really interesting episode.
Yeah.
Because Claudia and I disagree. This is a very rare time where I feel like she did not like the episodes and I thought they were good.
Well, I think I might have just been in a weird mood, to be fair. I think they actually had a lot of good... Judging from my notes, I actually did enjoy them. I just was kind of being a bitch when I texted Ollie about it, so...
I mean, but to be fair, I feel like these are episodes that, like, both have their issues, but I would say both have more good things than bad.
Yeah. Okay, I'll admit this, too. I think with the news that everyone wants us to talk about, with the boys' news, I'm feeling especially uncharitable towards Supernatural right now.
Before we get into it, I mentioned it at the beginning of our last episode, and we talked about it a tiny bit. So there was a lot of stuff that happened with Supernatural in this last, month. In the month of February, it was kind of insane. The first thing that happens is on the official Supernatural podcast, which is Supernatural Then and Now, by Rob Benedict and Richard Speight Jr. We had mentioned the episode previous to the one I'm going to talk about right now, in the last episode, where Rob was basically like, wow, it's really real. Like, you see Destiel happening. But in this last, the episode we're talking about now, which is the one after that, the two of them were both really like, yeah, it's insane. Like, that is so totally there. There's no, like, we're watching this show and it's absolutely, that's what's happening. And I think it's crazy because Rob is kind of like, yeah, like Richard was he was kind of giving me shit about it. But, like, now he's watching it and seeing it. And I saw a tweet that was like, wouldn't it have been so awesome if Richard Speight Jr. had watched season 4 and 5 before directing the confession episode?
Yeah. If people didn't know, the confession episode on November 5th, 2020, was directed by him. So it just added... Every time something happens with Supernatural, I either me or Ollie have to text each other, or we get texts from other people, and I go, how is there news about this thing 5 years after it ended?
Yeah.
And I have to beat my head against the wall. Like,
it's so sick. And I also think one of the things, too, about this that's really powerful to me is, like, all of the people who are saying, like, yeah, maybe if, like, the creatives had all actually, like, listen, I don't think that you should expect every creative who works on a show, especially one running as long as Supernatural, like, I wouldn't expect them to have watched every single episode of the show, just because that sounds crazy, but that's how TV production works. So that wouldn't be that shocking. But I do think it's really interesting that sort of the central dynamic between two characters was kind of not necessarily ignored, but played down because the creatives working on it maybe hadn't seen it or looked at it within that context, because I think that the, like, Destiel was so popular and that part of the fan base was so loud, I feel like there was almost a natural inclination to say, like, oh, well, no, that's not what's happening. You guys are just crazy fangirls. And now they're like, oh, shit, it kind of was happening. And it makes me feel insane because I think about, every single time I think about Jensen Ackles at that convention where someone was like, Dean Winchester helped me come out as bi, and he goes, let's not go there. Like, I'm like, if he had watched the show, maybe he would know.
He doesn't need to watch the show because he lives as Dean.
Yeah, this is kind of like how Tim Miner from 911 keeps basing Eddie Diaz's storylines off of Ryan Guzman's life.
Please. But we can't talk about 911 or else I'll get upset.
Guys, I think Buddy is happening.
No,
we're recording
I do
this.
Too.
Okay, guys, just so you know, we're recording this on March 5th. The next episode of 911 comes out on March 6th.
Oh my god.
So it's if happening. Buddy becomes canon between this recording and this episode coming out, everyone clap, and please, please everyone send me some money on my Venmo for predicting that. That's a joke. Don't send me money. Don't send me money.
Send many tweets at Timothy saying, thank you, we did it, Joe.
Yeah. Everyone at ABC and say, we love woke and DEI. Thank you. But anyway, but I think it's really fascinating that, you know, the creatives on this show, upon, not to say, like, obviously Rob and Dick are not, like, the showrunners or anything, but I do think it's interesting to see two people who, while are not, like, diametrically opposed to Destiel, it wasn't, like, their main thing.
Yeah,
but
now like, oh, damn.
Yeah, like, watching the show, we're like, oh, fuck, like, yeah, actually it is. Like that's actually so real.
It's so validating also to see people just take it and just go, oh, well, damn, that's something. Like, they have no investment in, say, and, like, maybe it's to get more listeners of the podcast. Maybe this is the next iteration of the last great American queerbait. But, like, damn, we should have called this show The Last Great American Queerbait.
That's gonna be the spin-off when we go back and when we finish watching Supernatural and we start over. We watch it in reverse order. But
that's a horrifying thought. Oh,
it's so scary.
The show will get better.
Yeah. If you watch Supernatural backwards, it gets better as it goes on. But I think it's crazy that it's like that. The other really funny thing that happened here is that they talked about Destiel, right? And they were like, okay, like, it's actually low-key undeniable, which is so validating for me, because when I was like 15, like 14, 15, 16, I was like so obsessed with Supernatural, and people would be like, you're delusional for thinking Destiel is like actually happening, or that you think that there's actually something there. And then to see these, like, you know, old straight white guys being like, wait, actually it is. That's great. But the other thing, it's so funny because they talked about it on the show, and people who don't ship Destiel, I feel like people are always like, oh, it's the Winchesters shippers. I'm sure some of it was, but it's mostly people who don't ship Destiel for whatever reason. Were like replying to them being like, can you please cut it out with the Destiel talk? And they had to like disable, I might be spreading misinformation, but I think either they had to disable comments or like there was like some bullshit. I could be wrong. I don't want to spread misinformation, but they were getting like attacked. It was crazy. I was like, imagine not winning. Imagine hearing Destiel is canon and not being like, I won.
Well, that's the thing. This comes back to the whole thing that I always have to remind myself as a Supernatural podcaster TM that, like, there are people who are obsessed with Supernatural and have been for a while who don't even have a concept of what Destiel is. So when they are confronted with this, they think this is woke and DEI, and they don't realize that that's the thing that kept their show on the air and keeps Jensen Ackles paid. Like,
but that's the thing. Well, to be fair, Jensen has jobs. Misha Collins, I don't know.
Well,
we'll get to that. But no, but it wasn't that. It's like people who, again, I think there are a lot of people involved in like the Supernatural fandom who just don't like Destiel, and I think it's fair if that's like, if it's not your cup of tea, like, that's fine.
No, I don't think it's fine. Ollie doesn't speak for me. I think you should go to hell.
No, but my point is that it's like, it's fine for you to not like something or for it to not be your cup of tea, but to tell people who are on the official podcast who are like, hey, you know what? Maybe this, like, queer relationship is actually real. And for you to be like, fuck you for starting a ship war on me personally. I'm like, guys, it ain't about that.
They're just watching media and seeing things. I know it's something a lot of you don't know how to do.
That
was so mean.
Yeah, but it was true.
Many children were left behind, Ollie.
You know what? And you're so right. How can we... This is like George W. Bush. He did this. I mean, he kind of is responsible for Destiel because, like, if the economy didn't crash in 2008, like, would we have Destiel?
That's true.
Like,
you need to get an economist on here.
That might be the only good thing George W. Bush has ever done.
Yeah.
Let Destiel happen.
You know how we have a segment on here called Things You Should Watch or Listen to or Consume That Are Not Supernatural? Speaking of kids who were left behind, if there's any podcast you listen to that's not our very serious supernatural podcast, you should listen to the Sold a Story podcast, which is this very nuanced take about if you've ever realized why the kids can't read. The kids cannot read, and like a lot of them now, it's a very nuanced take. And weirdly enough, there's a moment where it's like worst person you know is right, where George Bush like kind of didn't do something so bad, but then it ended up being bad anyway, and they explain a lot about it. It's really iconic, really amazing, even if you don't like anything about public policy or education. It's fascinating work. You will come out of it frustrated. They're coming out with new episodes right now. This is my ask of people who like Supernatural or a Supernatural podcast to go learn about public policy.
So true. I feel like if we can use all of the power of Destiel to mobilize, like, in favor of children's literacy, I feel like we can really make moves.
Yeah,
like
we can really
need to
make
start
it happen.
like a grassroots campaign, but you're only allowed in if you ship Destiel.
If you're a Winchester, I don't give a fuck if you want kids to read. Get out.
You just want kids to read your nasty fan fiction. No, listen. Again, if you ship Winchester, I think you're allowed. Just don't talk to me about it, because I'll laugh and I'll feel bad.
Know. I think having a don't ask, don't tell policy about Winchester.
Guys, why are we having such like a George W. Bush themed episode right now?
Do you think George W. Bush would ship Winchester?
Can we not talk about W anymore right now? I don't want to talk about him.
Well, as somebody who was a conscious human being during his
Girl, me too, the fuck?
Okay, but I'm older than you.
Yeah,
anyway.
But like, not that much. Okay, Klaudia loves to do this thing where she acts like she's a million years older than me, when in reality, we would have gone to high school together if we had lived, like, we would have been in the same cohort, so.
I just know we would have been in, like, symphony orchestra together, and we would have been hanging out in the band room together. It would have been so fucking dark.
If we had been friends in high school, like, I think maybe the most worsely, terribly adjusted people.
It would be so bad.
We would have fed into each other's, like, delusion, and
I would have gotten into Supernatural earlier, which is so dark.
It would have been like Folly Adieu. But
anyway, we have to talk about the boys.
So speaking of employment, for those of you who don't know, Eric Kripke has created a show that we've talked about on multiple occasions for Amazon Prime called The Boys. It is starring Jack Quaid, Anthony Starr, all these people. It's crazy, right? Jensen Ackles was on a later season of the show. The show's ending with its next season. Jensen Ackles shows up. He plays a character called Soldier Boy. And he's a smash hit. People love Soldier Boy. People are like, yes, she's like a cool alpha male. And I'm like, that is the world's first Omega you're talking about. Yeah. So jot that down. But
technically it was Spock.
That's okay. I don't know. I feel like Spock was kind of an alpha if you watch Amok Time.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Anyway, sorry not to actually you about Omega-verse Star Trek, but all that happens. Season 5 is going to be the last season of The Boys. People love him. Whatever. Love Soldier Boy. I opened my phone the other day to about 1 million text messages seeing, "Did you see the video?" And I said, what does that mean? What video? So I log on to twitter.com, which is actually not called that, but that's what I call it because I'm so much smarter than everyone else.
That's the name God gave her, and that's the name I'm calling her.
It's the only person I'm gonna dead name. But so I go on and I see a video, and it is Jensen Ackles, and he goes, "Jared, we've got work to do." Cut to Jared Padalecki, who says, "Great, I'll tell Misha." Cut to Misha Collins, who says, "What did we have to do again?" That might not be the correct quote, but that's the angle, that's the vibe. All of these filmed on their iPhones separately. They're not together. Like, they're not in the same room filming this. So it's an announcement video that Jared and Misha have been cast in The Boys.
Also, isn't the Impala or something in the background of the video at some point?
Yeah. Like, it was so dark. So they're going to be in The Boys, and yet somehow my and so many people's first instinct was to watch this and go, wow, even in a video announcing he is employed, Misha Collins is somehow acting so deeply unemployed right now.
And I'll say, I think Jared Padalecki is also acting unemployed because Walker got canceled, or Walker got canceled, right? Or did the Walker spinoff? Yeah. So I think
Walker
they're both acting unemployed. Like,
yeah. But I just feel like Misha Collins is one of those people who's terminally unemployed. So it's like, even when he is employed, he's acting unemployed. Jared, I feel like, doesn't always act deeply unemployed. He has his moments, but it's not like chronic. I will say, I do think about that article that Jared did the interview for after Walker got canceled, where he talked about like the state of television and of network TV.
No, because he kind of ate that.
He had like a really good take about being like, this isn't about creativity anymore. This is just about numbers. And that was worth reading. But which really like turned my opinion on him around in a lot of ways.
He's kind of the worst person is right. Like, he might be kind of an asshole, but but he was right in that respect.
But the crazy thing was that it was like, but the crazy thing about this is that like now Eric Kripke is posting about it, like the Boys' official account's posting about it, and I'm just sitting here like, hey, that's crazy. Like, imagine, I've seen, again, this is not an original thought from me, but it's like, imagine you're Jack Quaid, and you're like, yes, I'm like really becoming famous now, but this show that really like sort of helped me get a big like touchstone and was a move for my career, suddenly nobody gives a shit about my character anymore, and they're all talking about fucking Destiel fucking nasty on my Amazon Prime show that I'm on. Oh my god, and dude, it would suck to be him, because not only is that happening, but also your dad is Dennis Quaid. Like,
yeah, like,
no, he just burst out of Meg Ryan's head like Athena and Zeus.
No, because the crazy thing also about this is, like, the show is ending and whatever. It's like, you're Amazon. You shouldn't need all the Destiel people to market your show, but also, I know that you rely on the fandoms to do all the work for you. So, like, it's kind of crazy to me. And, okay, here's my theory. I think they were losing the Supernatural fans to 911, so they had to get them back.
There's someone that I follow on Twitter who is so fucking funny, because they love Destiel, they love Supernatural, and they fucking hate Buddy. They love 911 though. And I'm like, but you know what? I respect the hell out of that, because I'm like, it takes so much to be like, that's like someone who's just a hater to be a hater, and I'm like, I can respect that.
Yeah,
but
I can respect that.
I digress. I think it's really powerful that they would try to market this to Supernatural fans, because I'm like, you're trying to get a bunch of like mentally ill, non-binary and queer, I don't know why I excluded non-binary from queer, what the fuck, a bunch of mentally ill queer people who are between the ages now probably of like, what, I don't know, like
40?
18 to 40,
yeah,
like, trying to corner that market to watch The Boys, which is like supposedly a satirical conversation on the relationship between superheroes and the superhero aesthetic and like US imperialism and like the military industrial complex. So I'm like, oh god, I don't want Supernatural fans to have to watch a show that you have to have a nuanced take on.
Well, like, they've already given up because half of their fans don't understand their shit and are unironically fans of Soulja Boy. So, I mean, common Eric Kripke L to create something that is a bit of a parody or a bit of a satire of something, and people to take it literally because he's just not a good writer.
Shit. It's like, even when Eric Kripke's doing his best work, I'm like, well, this could have been better.
Yeah, yeah.
No, but the point is, I just think that, first of all, I bet Misha and Jared's characters are gonna get killed off, like, so fast. Like, I don't think they're gonna be, like, actually on the show for a very long time. It's gonna be for a gag or something. But I also think it would be really funny if, Misha Collins' character shows up and is like, Soulja Boy, we need to fuck nasty right now.
Could you imagine? Because I think that would be the closest we would ever get to November 5th, 2020, because we would have actual gifs of them kissing on the mouth.
I saw a tweet that was like, I bet that this is the soft launch for a season 16, because they're trying to see if the three of them can stand each other long enough in a professional environment for a new season.
Please don't say that. If
I'm
there's
saying
new
HBO
Supernatural, I'll have to jump off a building.
HBO Max original.
Wait.
Supernatural season 16. I need them to... Dude, I have so many pitches that we've talked about in this show of season 16 episodes. I need my Bachelor episode.
Ollie,
my god.
The media landscape, if that happens, would be that there's a Harry Potter reboot and a Supernatural reboot at the same time, and then I'll have to launch myself off a building.
The idea... Oh god. That would be really dark, guys.
The most toxic online environment imaginable.
It would be maybe, like, the worst thing ever.
Like, J.K. Rowling sucks, but you know what sucks more? Supernatural season 16.
Okay, I have to disagree with that. I'm so sorry.
And that was me being /J. Obviously, she sucks more.
Yeah, obviously we would rather Supernatural season 16 than
Supernatural season 16 versus John Lithgow as Dumbledore.
Dude, John Lithgow as Dumbledore. For those of you who don't know, there's a fuck-ass Harry Potter reboot that's going to be a Max original, and they cast John Lithgow as Dumbledore, and this sucks because I can't start talking about Conclave on this podcast because that's going to be a fucking nightmare.
Another piece of media you should consume instead of Supernatural.
Yeah,
Conclave.
Another piece of queer media, because, fun fact, the character that was adapted from the main character in the book, which is pretty, like, one-for-one retelling, a couple of details were changed, but that character is, like, a cardinal, and in the book, he has this part where he talks about how he's never jacked off because, you know, he's a priest and he's celibate, but he's like, he was not a stranger to the feelings of wanting and being wanted by men and women. And I was, like, reading the book and was like, wait... Ralph Fiennes is playing a bisexual cardinal with terrible, terrible depression. I'm so sad.
It's such a good movie. It was robbed by the Oscars, but I'm happy as long as Emilia Perez lost.
Yeah. I can't talk about Emilia Perez. I'm already mad as fuck about Supernatural existing and me having to think about it. The point is, Supernatural season 16, Supernatural movie spinoff.
Oh, 6 seasons and a movie? We're getting the Community treatment?
Fuck off. I think that the Supernatural movie would win every Oscar if Max and HBO want to start doing, like, film production and want to, like, do maybe, like, like the qualifying theatrical runs. They should invite us to the premiere and we can be, like, red carpet correspondents.
This would be like the equivalent of when they brought the McElroy brothers onto the blue carpet for the Jimmy Buffett
Exactly.
musical.
Dude, they should invite us to do, like, bit parts like the McElroy brothers when they were in Trolls, too. Imagine they have okay, wait, I just thought of the perfect role for us in Supernatural season 16. Either season 16 or the movie. No, listen. Here's what our role is. I have mentioned this sort of thing in the show where I was like, I bet these characters exist in the Supernatural universe where, let me say this. Let me say it.
Oh no.
I imagine, because Sam and Dean Winchester are, like, wanted criminals, right? And then it's like they died, but then it's like people keep reporting that they keep showing up, and then there's, like, these books that have really eerily similar descriptions and stuff about them. I think that there has to be a podcast that's like Serial or something covering these guys.
We're My Favorite Murder podcast.
Yes,
Supernatural movie.
That's what I'm saying, is that's what we are, and that's the role we need to play in the Supernatural movie / season 16. And I think that there has to be an episode where they show up and we're recording a podcast being like, and I just think it's really crazy because, like, you know, obviously these books are fictional and talk about, like, monsters and stuff, but, like, some of the events in this book, like, clearly coincide with, like, other stuff that was happening in the news. And, like, I mean, what's the chance that two brothers who both have some sort of, like, magical, like keep talking about, like, magic and stuff? Like, what's the chance that that would be real? Because the books were being published, like, before these guys were even famous. So, like, it's not, like, based on them. I don't know. I think we need to talk about this Carver Edlund guy. I think he might have a connection to them.
I'm obsessed with the idea of a supernatural end of Evangelion, a supernatural, like, getting the anime treatment of the series ended and now there's a fuck-ass movie is so, it's so dark. I don't even know what it would be about, given how I know how that stupid show ends. They remake the final episode as a movie.
Wait.
And they get everybody to be there. Okay, I would actually want that.
Yeah. I'm saying, I really, and I think maybe, like, if they got people who'd, again, okay, directed by Richard Speight Jr.
Exactly.
Okay, guys, we're on it. I have, like, a couple $100 in my bank account. Maybe we can apply towards, like, how much do you need to make a movie, honestly? Like, how expensive could it be?
You can at Elon Musk on x.com say, please give me
with
season
all the money
16 of Supernatural.
With all the money that you're saving with Doge. If you
government funded season 16 of Supernatural. You know what? That's a better use of my tax dollars than sending it to Israel. So, you know what? I'll allow it. I'll allow it.
Yeah, like, I know Eric Kripke's a bit of a Zionist freak, but...
Yeah. Another reason not to watch The Boys.
Anyway, okay.
Today we continue Season 5 with Season 5, Episode 13. The song remains the same. Is this halfway through? Well, no, technically we already covered. We already covered the mid-season. This is a very plot-heavy episode. We are not going to be Monster of the Weeking it this week.
It's funny because it's really plot-heavy, but it's also kind of like, I mean, it's not inconsequential, but it's kind of like, okay, we did that.
Yeah. So the episode opens on, I wrote it down as him getting a very stereotypical lap dance. The wiki rates it as having a dream wherein he is receiving VIP treatment from two exotically clad girls who are dancing to Warrant's Cherry Pie.
I mean, it is. Dean is, like, just chilling in this strip club, and there's a girl who's dressed up as a devil.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, maybe I do like Satan. And then there's a girl dressed up as an angel, and they're like, oh my god, we're touching each other. And he's like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yeah, you're like, what's going on here? My first thought was, how can he afford this private room? And then you realize it is a dream.
Yeah, my thought is, I'm like, even his dreams are performative.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Suddenly, lo and behold, our favorite underdeveloped female character, Anna, appears. Anna, aka the angel that he fucked in this series instead of Castiel.
Diva. Anna is a diva, though.
She's a diva, and I have to respect her. So she appears, the dancers are gone, and Dean's like, and she kind of shames him for his dream, and she's like, is this what you dream about? And he's like, oh, I was working on a case. And she's like, anyways, I couldn't find you other than in a dream. And he's like, well, yeah, that's because Castiel did his thing, which was, if you recall, putting the hashtag Enochian wording on his ribs. Me when I'm just marking a man on his ribs in a platonic way.
Well, he did it to Sam, too. And I mean...
Well, that's because he loves his brother-in-law, okay? Like, he wants to protect him, too, okay?
Yeah. I don't even have listen, here's my problem. This is, like, I don't really ship Sam and Cass. Like, I just never got it. It's not my thing. But there was a moment in this episode where I was like, okay, I get it. Like, I get,
yeah.
I don't
There's
ship
not
it,
a lot of food, but there's a crumbs. There's a couple
and
crumbs.
I get where you guys are coming from, and I feel like people who ship Sam and Cass, like, it must be so hard being you, and I have so much respect for you, and that is not a joke.
No, like it's not my cup of tea, but I'm really happy for you guys, you know? Unlike Winchester shippers, get help.
Oh, see, I love Winchester shippers, not because, again,
I love them, and that's why I want them to get help.
See, I love them, and I don't ever want them to stop because I think it's hilarious.
Well, we wouldn't have the show as we have it today without them.
That's what I'm saying.
We wouldn't have the Omegaverse without them. So
that's so true. We have to. That's the thing. Every time we talk shit about Winchester shippers, I feel like I have to be like, no, actually, they're an important part of the fandom ecosystem. We have to be kind.
They're kind of like mosquitoes. It's like, I don't want to personally be near them, but they're important to the ecosystem. You know what I mean?
Are mosquitoes important to the ecosystem?
I mean, they are. Like, there's animals that eat them, and then there's like they're like food for certain parts of the. They are.
I guess that's true.
Common DC area moment. Are mosquitoes that important?
Yeah. Like, I know a lot of, if we got rid of all mosquitoes, I know a lot of things would die, but like, I feel like, Vanessa Hudgens, when she was talking about how she wanted to go to festivals and didn't care that people would die of COVID. That was, anyway, wear a mask, get vaccinated, bird flu is bad, measles are fucking here again. So.
Get vaccinated before RFK Jr. takes away vaccines, measles.
COVID's also still happening, so don't, like 1,000 people die from it, like at least every week, so.
Get your boosters, just get boosted up, It's a good time. Just
tell them I just sent you.
I just go to the doctor and I say, just give them all. Give me all of them. I don't care if I've had them before. Just give them all to me.
I want double dosages. You got more microchips in the back? Can I get another one?
Like, I don't
microchip.
I don't care if it gives me the tism. I did make this joke to my grandmother, the fact that this president is terrible and that people are getting diseases from her time, and she thought that was really funny. And I was like, yeah, the younger generation is gonna learn what an iron lung is. Anyways, don't get polio.
Don't get polio. That's my big, if you could take away one thing, you can quote me on that. Like, Ollie Fresh says, don't get polio.
Yeah, like, getting polio, it's really bad. You could be in an iron lung. However, if you get the vaccine and you get autism, you could be obsessed with Supernatural.
Oh, that's
Which
almost
one is
worse. Which is worse?
Maybe we're doing an anti-vax campaign. Anyways, vaccines do not cause autism, and this is an RFK Jr. hating podcast.
Yes.
Wow, how do we always end up being political? Anyway,
well, because it's almost like everything is political, and people try to be like, oh my god, but what if it isn't? And it's like, well, actually, everything was created in a climate. Everything was created in a society, so sorry. You
are not immune to propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways,
I know that's right.
Let's talk about Dean in the strip club.
in the dreamscape.
Oh god. Dean in the strip club, what will he do? Anyways, so Anna's kind of laughing at his ass, and he's like, yeah, you couldn't find me. And he mentions Cass, and she's like, oh, you don't know? And she kind of says it in a really funny, bitchy way. She's like, oh, you don't know? Like, also, I think she's a little jealous of Cass, but
I don't, yeah, she's such a diva.
She's such a diva, and rightly so. And Dean's like, no. And she's like, oh, well, Cass betrayed me. And, like, he ratted on me to her superiors, and that's why I'm in prison. And he's like, prison? Where? And she's like, up in heaven, like evil heaven prison. And Dean is like, oh, did Pookie lie to me? Did he not tell me that he turned Anna in? And Dean's like, I'm really sorry, like, and he's like, I didn't know, and she's like, you shouldn't be shocked, because, and she kind of gets him with this, she's like, he was a good little soldier, just like he's always been, which is a hot topic to say to Dean, of all people, so, and she's like, well, I escaped, and now they're looking for me. So, and he's like, how'd you do that? And she's like, never mind. No need to talk about that. Anyway, meet me at 225 Industrial. And I'm like, where? Like, does he know that that's a street in the town he's in? Like, can we give a state? Like,
I like the idea of him leaving this mind meld and being like, okay, so I've gone on MapQuest and looked up every 225 Industrial, so we're just gonna have to hope the first one we go to is right.
Yeah, I was like, okay. And then he wakes up. Then we cut to, speaking of 225 Industrial, we cut to Supernatural's favorite set piece, which is a darkened industrial warehouse of some kind. Anna is at this supposedly industrial place, and Dean isn't there yet. She's like, hello, is there anyone here? And then this is Castiel's diva moment. Being a diva runs in the family, apparently, and
one of many diva moments from him in these next two episodes.
Yeah. And Cass shows up, and he's like bursting the light bulbs and whatever, and he kind of like shows up behind her in like a oops, I could have dropped my croissant kind of way, which is very funny to me. And she's like, I guess, the Winchesters, didn't trust me enough to show up themselves. And which is so funny to me. It's like, oh, they sent their little attack dog? That's crazy. We're at that level of trust with Cass. We did it, Joe.
He says something that makes me be like, oh my God, I wish I'd seen that conversation, where Anna's like, oh, I guess I can take it the Winchesters didn't trust me enough to show up. And Cass is like, oh, they trust you. I don't. And I'm like, the fact that Dean was like, okay, we need to call Cass. And not only did they call him, but Cass was also like, okay, girls, let me go in. And they were like, but we trust Anna. And he said, okay, but trust me. And they did.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm being like
that?
friend who reads too much into everything, but like, I don't necessarily need that scene to be in the show. But I think it's like that kind of is a really good example of like how their relationships have progressed.
Yeah. And they just left that to implication. You're like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. I wrote in my notes, the Winchesters are his pookies.
They literally are his pookies, though. Like, even Sam is his pookie.
No, literally. And speaking of Sam being his pookie, so he's like, listen, I know you made it out of prison, and because I know you're doing #heaven's dirty work. And she's like, no, I'm doing what it needs to be done to actually help. And he's like, And he says, I know from experience the costs of heaven's persuasion, aka torture, which is like, shit, what happened to him? A lot of things are implied in this conversation. They're kind of bitching back and forth, and Anna's like, you need to not underestimate me, especially after you handed me over. And Cass actually, Cass does something crazy. He apologizes to a woman. He says, I acknowledge that was a mistake, and I shouldn't have done it, but obviously you're still lying to me. There's something you're not telling me. And he's like, he points out that she brought a knife with her, and it's not an angel blade. So he's like, that's not going to do anything. And she's like, okay.
She's like, because he's like, oh, why do you have a knife? And she's like, oh, I'm not allowed to protect myself. And he's like, girl, we both know that allegedly the angels are the ones chasing you. And you know that's not going to do jack or shit to them. So what's the actual tea?
Yeah.
You're not in trouble, Boots. We just need to figure out the tea on this situation.
Yeah.
Do you know that tweet that's like, hey, Diva, can I call you Diva? I'm Detective Fierce. Don't worry, Boots. You're not in trouble. We just need to get the tea on this situation.
That's literally Cass in this scene.
Literally.
Literally. And she pulls out the knife and she's like, okay, listen, Queen. The only way to stop Lucifer is to kill Sam, his true vessel. And they do make a little joke here of he's like, okay, well, doesn't he have another vessel? And she's like, that one's burning up. And this is the point where I go, I wish that vessel had burnt up so we wouldn't have to deal with Mar Pellegrino, but here we are.
I just remembered I'm not to be the guy who's to 911, but I just remembered when he kidnapped Buddy on 911
oh my God,
in an ambulance. That was such a good Buddy episode. Oh my God, guys, you need to watch 911. Buddy is going to be canon.
I
say this,
Mark Pellegrino.
In our next episode, I will give you guys an update on the status of Buddy canon, but again, because this episode we're recording before the next episode of 911 and releasing after, I might sound fucking crazy, but like you might be like, oh my God, they already like fuck nasty on screen, and which would be insane, but
they should fuck nasty on the proverbial couch.
They should. So true. I thought you were gonna say on The Boys. Like,
no,
Buddy is canon on The Boys.
Making Buddy canon but not Destiel would be crazy work.
Okay, I hope Misha Collins plays a firefighter on that show, and I hope they have a flashback. I've lost the metaphor. I've lost it. It's gone. I've lost it.
And do you ever think about like top 10 ships that Tumblr loves that have some sort of baggage with a couch, and it's like Vashwood and Buddy?
That's an insane comparison. That's a fucking crazy
Venn diagram. We have to get back to Destiel.
Cass is having a slay moment.
Cass is like, okay, but Lucifer could just bring Sam back to life. And she's like, not if I scatter his cells across the universe to make that impossible. Which, you know what? Damn, bitch. That's crazy. And Cass is like, absolutely not. That's my Pookie. He said, you can't do that because Sam is my friend. And you're like, oh, wait, I'm gonna cry. Hold on. Wait a minute.
No, it's really sweet because it's like, you know, originally Cass really just gave a fuck about Dean just because he's like, okay, that's my job. But it's like, not only does he care about Dean because, you know, he just has started to care, but he also just cares about Sam because he cares about people.
Yeah.
And the fact that Cass is like making friends, it's like, oh, he's progressed so much.
You're like, that's my Pookie right there.
And it also is so funny to me because it's like, Cass literally has nothing else other than these two. Like, that is, these are the only people he has, plus Bobby occasionally, but like...
He's kind of like me in college, honestly.
The only people you have are Sam and Dean Winchester and sometimes Bobby.
Oh,
so true. We've all been there.
Yeah. It is a really nice moment, and he's also serving and slaying in this moment when he says this, and Hannah's kind of taken aback. She's like, oh, like, you know, like, this is your change of heart, and she's like, I'm gonna stop Lucifer, and there's only one way to do that, and they're having a diva off, and she's like, oh, so like, how's the search for the cult going? How's the search for God going? Whatever. And Cass is like, okay, you kind of got me. And
yeah, and she's also like, you motherfucker, the cult didn't even work on Lucifer, you dumb bitch.
Yeah.
Kill yourself.
And Cass is like, you know what? Even though we've been through a lot, which is this is very sibling behavior. He's like, you know, even though we've been through a lot, I will kill you if you come near Sam. And I'm like, damn, okay. And the wiki says she flutters away. She disappears, and she shows up. The scene cuts to a couple making out in a vintage car, and it pans to the hood of the car where there, of course, are wings. There's like a Firebird decal of wings. And she lands right on top of it, and she's like bleeding out and whatever. And this couple is like, oh, whatever, with her, and they go and they help her.
Is she bleeding? I don't think she's bleeding. I think she just kind of passed out. Maybe she has a nosebleed?
I think she has like a slight nosebleed because Cass has more. And then it pans up to a poster for the movie Grease. And you're like, wait a minute. That's like on the wall outside. And you're like, wait a minute, when is this? Because if you remember, angels can time travel. Horrible news. That's what this episode will be about.
Also, I'm literally so obsessed with, I was like, fucking John Travolta jump scared. Like, that was scary.
I was like,
that was scarier than, I say this as someone, all respect for Grease. Love Grease. I don't think I'm ever expecting to see John Travolta.
Yeah, it's always a bit of a jump scare, to be honest. And then it's Supernatural, or I believe...
No, Supernatural, that happened like halfway through Cass and Anna's conversation.
Oh,
she's like,
yeah.
She's like,
it's very dumb.
She's like, Sam Winchester has to die. Supernatural. And then I guess if it was like a commercial break, it would have been fine.
But yeah, it gets back to their conversation. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. No, when you're watching, that's another thing streaming has made so funny, where you're like, oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's very odd. At least in anime, they have the little end cards, the Full Metal Alchemist, and then you know there was supposed to be a commercial there. We cut to the Winchesters. They're in a motel room. Cass shows up. He's like, hey, this is what Anna said. Clearly, this was their plan. They were going to send Cass. And Dean goes, I can't believe Anna's gone all Glenn Close on them. And Cass is like, what does that mean? And he's like, well, she's just a psycho bitch who likes to kill rabbits. And I'm like,
my God.
Dean, your inability to say any sentence without a reference to a film it's puzzling.
It's autism.
It's autism. Like, there's no other way.
That's the only explanation. That's something I think is really powerful about TV, is that it's like, you could say, oh, the writers were trying to be cheeky. And I'm like, well, the only reason someone would say this in real life is because of autism. So.
Yeah.
And you know what? I love that for him.
Yeah, he is autistic, and we love that.
Yeah. And anyone who says any bad shit about Dean Winchester is just ableist, so jot that down.
Yeah. This is, I think, one of the first times that Cass also says the I don't understand that reference, which he starts to say a lot. And Sam's like, okay, so, but is Anna correct that the only way to stop Lucifer is by killing me? He's like, should I kill myself? If that helps, I'll kill myself.
Does anyone want me to kill myself? Can I get some kill myself for the table? If I get some kill myself, does anyone else want some kill myself?
No, literally. In this.
And meanwhile, I'm the person watching the show, and I'm like, me!
Oh my god. Cass is like, no, there has to be another way, but I know that Anna's not going to give up until Sam is dead. So Cass has been hanging around the Winchesters too long because he's like, well, we have to kill her first. And it says he prepares a tracking spell to find her. In the episode, it also doesn't make sense because it's like, well, how would you do that? Because she's already in the past, so I don't know. They just create some mumbo jumbo spell on the spot that they're doing spell work in this fucking motel room, having an angel doing a spell. Again, typical supernatural shit. And he finds out that she has gone into the past because Cass won't let her near Sam. Which I'm like, okay, but Cass did exist back then, but I guess he didn't know them, so I guess that makes sense. She has time traveled back to 1978 to kill John and Mary Winchester. And I'm like, okay, she could have just killed the baby Sam, but okay, I guess make double the amount of work for you herself, I guess. Again, not a lot of this logically makes sense. And then Sam and Dean are like, we need to come with you to go back and stop her. And Cass is like, okay, time travel is hard, and even with the powers of heaven, but I'm cut off. So, transporting all three of you is going to be hard. All three of us is going to be really hard for me. And they're like, we have to go. We have to save our parents. We have to set everything right, blah, blah, blah. And they pack for the trip. They do everything. I don't know if they truly understand. Like, he doesn't have a lot to do this, but sure. And they arrive in 1978, Lawrence, Kansas, and they show up in the middle of the street, which doesn't make sense, but they show up in the middle of the street. A car bumps into them. It is clearly a car from the 70s. They're like, okay, I think we're here. And they're like, where's Cass? And they turn around, and Cass is like slumped against a parked car, bleeding out, like he's doing badly. He's like, mamas, I told you. I fucking told you.
He's bleeding out of his face, out of his nose, and he's like, oh.
Yeah, and they're like, fuck. I guess, and it says in the wiki, the boys tuck him into a hotel room. They just like tuck him in and go, okay, bye.
No, it's so funny because Dean goes in, he has this line where he's like, we see Sam, like, this scene kind of cuts. Sam is waiting outside, and Dean walks outside of a motel, and he's like, all right, I put Cass up in that motel for, like, a week, and I told the guy at the front desk, like, yeah, I'm gonna leave him. He's gonna stay here for a week. Do not disturb him, no matter what you do. And you know what he said to me? He said, oh, that's cool, man. I got a great deal on dope.
I forgot about that.
And Dean's like, okay, damn, dope? It really is the 70s. Fuck.
I love I'm like, where did they get money to put him up in the hotel? In the motel? Like,
you know what? That's actually a really good question.
Because, like, don't you have to, if it's a motel, don't you have to, like, pay up front?
Or put something on file? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe they paid in cash, but
I guess they brought cash with them.
I mean, I feel like I assume that these guys just always have cash on them, just by nature of how many times they bribe people.
Is it inflation if you bring money from the future and put it into the economy in the past?
Ooh. I don't, that's, I like the idea that it's like, this, like, I don't know.
This crashes the economy.
Like, yeah, this, like, $300 Dean Winchester put up actually changed the entire economic landscape for the next 40 years.
Yeah, we actually avoid Ronald Reagan.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So jot that down.
I'm writing.
Or it causes it because this is part of the timeline. You know what I mean?
That's also... See, okay, here's my thing about time travel, and I've said it before on this show. I don't really generally like time travel when it just randomly appears, and it's like, oh, you can just time travel? Because I'm like, well, why doesn't everyone just time travel? But I think... I don't mind time travel so much when it goes back in time and it's like the point is that this had already happened anyway. I don't like it when it's like we're going to go back and change the past and then the future's different.
If you had the chance to change your fate, would you?
Oh my god, I knew your ass was going to say that. I think it's like, it's fine because at the end of this episode, you kind of learn it was like, oh no, they had already been there and that's like them being there set things up for where they are in the present. As opposed to being like, they went back and changed it,
Which is also what happens the last time Cass sends Dean back as well. And I will say that, like, is this canonical with the Winchesters? No, I will say that this, like, it does work well with the theme that they're trying to get to in this episode and the next episode of free will and what is predetermined, which is when Supernatural is at its best. But
yeah, it's because it's when it has something to say.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's another symptom of Supernatural is like, right? Like, I kind of feel like after season 5, they kind of are like, well, what do we have to say? And it loses the plot of being like, oh, the show is about free will and about breaking cycles.
Yeah.
And it kind of loses that plot after season 5 and only regains it like towards the end of the show.
Yeah.
And even then, it's like, oh, it's been so long, like, it's half-baked, but, like, they kind of remembered, like, oh, fuck, that's what the show's about.
Yeah. And I will say, I want to say it here before I forget, like, especially because, like, this episode starts with, like, him in the strip club and, like, all this kind of stuff, and, like, I have this ongoing theory that Supernatural is a form of drag in that... Hold on.
Okay, Claudia texted me with no context and was like, I think Supernatural's drag. Not good drag, but drag. And I was like, I cannot wait for the explanation when we record.
It's drag in the sense that in the way that there is, like, in the way that drag queens do basically a hyper-realistic version of femininity as performance, Supernatural is a hyper-realistic performance of the American idea of masculinity to the point where it's a parody that gay people can make fun of. But, like, that's okay. I get what you're saying. Like, I'm on board. It's reducing the idea of white male masculinity down to I like hamburger, classic car and drive, down to the point where you have these things where every episode they're like, I don't talk about my feelings, even though we have a segment where we talk about our feelings in every episode. And, like, that's also what brings us to the point of Supernatural where it gets ridiculous of, like, you need to just acknowledge what's here because it is a performance already, but they don't say that it's a performance. And that's also when they divert from that, that's also why the message of the show gets so muddled, because if it's a hyper-realistic performance of what American masculinity should be, and you have the actual characters kind of breaking that down for themselves, and also trying to ask themselves what is predetermined, what does that say about the American dream, or what being a white American man means, and et cetera, et cetera. And also, if once we get into the whole thing of predetermined, because we get into that later in this episode and in the next episode, of, like, a big part of the American dream and the thing is that I'm free to do whatever I want and my destiny isn't predetermined. Like, that team free will idea is so integral to the like white male American mind. and to that American dream idea and whatever, which is perpetuated to so many other people. Like, Supernatural is kind of an iconic, and I would argue Supernatural is really good propaganda in that way.
That's really interesting, because I feel like Supernatural kind of also fights against the idea of, like, rugged individualism.
Yeah.
Where, like, it plays into it in the fact that it's, like, it's these loner guys who feel like they're the only ones who can do this to save the world. But it's also kind of about them having this community of, like, these friends that they've met and this little group that they've built. But then it also circles back around to being like, well, we're better off, like, you know, at the end of the day, we can't make friends, we can't get too close to people, and it becomes, like, self-sacrificial, which then kind of does play into it. So it's a weird, like, it's a weird mix. So I think that's a really interesting point.
Well, and it's also, like, because both the American liberal and the American conservative mind cannot reconcile some of these ideas, you have this show that is both trying to say this one thing but then saying this other thing, which is what you just said of, like, it's trying to say that, you know, if you're just two guys you can keep saving the world. But what does the show actually say is when they're just two guys who are just trying to save the world, they fail over and over again. But it's when they involve their community and help from others is when they actually succeed. Not to, like, spoil the end of the show, but they're able to kill God with, like, other people's help. Like, it's not just the two of them. But, like, that is also what is at the crux of what is so frustrating about Supernatural, is that what it wants to say, it is not good at saying, and instead it says something else that it is incredibly good at saying, which speaks to all the stupid gay people watching it.
Well, and that's actually, like, wait, I feel like I just connected the dots, because that's what Destiel is, and this is not just to try to be like, oh my god, shipper goggles, but, like, you have this really meaningful, powerful, and this, I think you could argue this about the relationship between a lot of the characters, and I think you could argue this about, like, the brotherhood between Sam and Dean, and how it's like what they're saying isn't always what's happening on screen. But I think Destiel's a good example where it's like they're saying that it's this brotherly bond between these two, they're saying that it's like, oh, they're family, whatever, but then you have, like, when you actually watch the show, it's like, oh, this is a connection that's very different from what Dean has with other men who he does see in a familial way in the show. So I think that's actually, like, a really emblematic of the show, is that what it's trying to say is very different from the actual presentation of what's happening. I'm going to say something, and I don't want to get on a rant about it, but it's kind of like Arcane in that way. Yes! Where it's like the animators are doing something that is not necessarily totally out of line with what the actual script says. Yeah. But definitely is, like, the visuals and the impact of that makes the show feel like something the writers don't necessarily intend for it to. Yeah. And I think that that's, like, it leads to a lot of, like, some of the most insane discourse. Sorry, I just watched Arcane recently, and I feel like I've been watching the fandom. I'm like, oh my god, some of you people are fucking crazy.
It's like, I thought Supernatural league property.
Well, it's that, but I feel like the biggest thing with that show is that people just expected it to be something that it wasn't. And, like, you know, whatever. And that's not necessarily on, like, anyone's fault. Like, I don't need to get into Arcane fandom drama on our Supernatural podcast, but I think it is a good example of what you're saying.
Yeah. Also, I have to say, on the point of is Supernatural propaganda, I think Supernatural serves a very similar purpose to propaganda and surveillance state propaganda, in that it, you know, the key part of good propaganda is that it is a fantasy. It is a fantasy of law and order in our current law and order of our current whatever, you know, the cops get it and then they prosecute the guy. Like, it is fantasy for people who don't like fantasy, right? And Supernatural, while it is fantasy and horror, it is a fantasy of the American dream and of what being a cis white man should be in America. And so men watch this and they eat it up because it's like, oh my god, like this speaks to exactly what America should be in my mind.
Also, I think also it's sort of this idea of justice.
Exactly.
And this idea of justice dealt out by the hands of someone who's there, like a street level bureaucrat, which is what they call cops, is they're people who are enforcing a certain code without oversight from like, because I mean, you watch like cop shows and all of the things is like the cop can't get a warrant and that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, in real life, yeah, a cop should have to get a fucking warrant to search someone's house.
Yeah.
But then it's like, when you watch the show, it's like, oh man, he knows this guy is guilty. If only he could just go in. And I think that kind of feeds into the fantasy that it's like, well, the reason there's so much red tape. And it's like, well, actually, the reason that's there is despite how flawed it is and despite how that system doesn't work in a lot of cases, it is there to keep cops, people who are armed, like with military grade weapons and with basically unchecked power in some cases. It protects people from oversteps from someone who's overzealous and who tries to be like an independent thinker.
Yeah.
Like, so I think you see a show like this where they're sort of operating outside of the law and doing like vigilante justice. That's also kind of fills into that same, like, look how much more effective they are because they don't have to deal with the red tape.
Exactly. You know? And it falls into the same like idea of like misunderstanding the Punisher and a lot of ideas of like American superheroes and that kind of thing of like the fantasy isn't actually the superpowers or the monsters. The fantasy is, you know, we're just two guys who can make it work. Okay.
Wow.
Wait. I just thought about that trend on TikTok about the millennial burger joints, and I was like, okay, AU, where instead of them hunting ghosts, they have one of those millennial burger joints where they're just two brothers with a dream.
Shut up. The idea of, I feel like Dean would want to not, if they had a burger place, Dean would not want it to be that hokey. I feel like he would want it to be some classic diner bullshit, and Sam's like, well, with all of my knowledge from college. Okay.
He's a pre-law student.
Oh my god. He's a pre-law student with a dream.
He just had a dream, and then they have metal cups of ketchup. Don't talk shit about burger joint like that.
Oh, see, I was like, don't talk to me about those little metal cups of ketchup. Okay, this has been I think this is a very good conversation. One we will continue to have as the show goes on.
Yeah.
But also, we gotta hit
we gotta go. I'm so sorry. I don't know how I got onto this.
No, I'm happy we had this conversation.
I wanted to talk about how Supernatural is drag. I think it's also drag because in order to play their characters, they have to all do really deep voices.
I mean, I feel like Dean Winchester is a drag queen. Or
he's
drag
a drag
king in so many ways.
Because he's a he-him lesbian being a drag king. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sorry to the straight people listening to this podcast, but Dean Winchester is a he-him lesbian who is a drag king. Obviously.
I've said it. We literally talked about this in the last episode, how something I love about Dean Winchester is that he's every gender and every sexuality at the same time.
Yeah.
So, like, however you see him is correct.
Yeah.
And honestly, low-key, kind of feel the same way about both of them. About him and Sam. Both of them can be kind of any gender you want them to be.
Like, Sam gives me such straight girl vibes.
Interesting.
Like, I see him as a straight girl to me.
Oh, see, I feel like I feel like there's an argument made for me where I can see Sam as more of a masc lesbian than I can Dean.
Okay.
Because I feel like Dean is just, I feel like his relationship with men is just so important to his character.
Hey mama's masc lesbian Sam, who has a crash out after his girlfriend burns on the ceiling, would kind of hit.
That feels so true. Suddenly I'm like, wait, Sam's my favorite character.
We kind of give Sam shit on this podcast, but he's a fun guy. Anyways, we have to get back to 1978.
Fuck.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Where were we? Okay.
This is going to be our longest episode yet.
Okay. So, the boys, they find their parents' address in a phone book, which I think is very funny. They're like, hey, we found it. Let's go. And then they show up at the door and Mary is there. And right before they get there, Sam is like, okay, like, how are we going to handle this? And Dean's like, okay, well, we can't just walk up there because she knows what I look like because I've been in the past before. So this is going to be a little awkward. And so when they show up, this is the first time that Sam is meeting his parents in the past, but not Dean, as we can recall. And Mary answers the door and she's like, what the heck? Like, she sees Dean, and the last time she saw him, some pretty bad shit went down. And she was like, what is going on? And she's like, basically in coded language, she's like, I don't do that anymore. Get out. And which to, like, the unknowing ear would sound like she was doing drugs or something, which I think is funny. And she's like, John doesn't know anything about that part of my life, whatever. And then John comes to the door and he's like, oh, like, who are these people? And Dean's like, oh, we're Mary's cousins. We're like family. And we're Sam and Dean.
A really great thing I love about Sam and Dean doing this is that they're Mary's cousins, but they never really determine, like, what part of Mary's family they're from. Because, like, over the course of the episode, they're like, oh, yeah, Mary's dad, yeah, we're, like, Sam. And because John is like, oh, yeah, that was Mary's dad's name was Sam. And Dean is like, oh, yeah, it's a family name. Which is hilarious, because then later they're like, oh, yeah, Mary looks just like our mom. It's crazy. So I'm like, so which side of the family are you from? Her mom or her dad?
Yeah, it's like, okay. It's genuinely insane. It also means that they name their kids Sam and Dean after their own kids. We can't get into that, but here we are. So... And Sam's kind of taken aback. He's like, oh my God, like, look at my parents. They're so young. They're so happy. They're so beautiful, whatever. And Dean is the one who's talking. And John is like, oh my God, I never get to meet members of Mary's family. Like, come on in, whatever. And Mary's like, oh my God, like, she's trying to get them out. And it is so disturbing seeing John Winchester be, like, nice and normal. I hate this motherfucker.
It's so sad because the problem is I hate grown John Winchester. If he's played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, except for in that one brief flashback in episode 1, I hate him. No beef with Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Love you, King. But, that I hate him. But every other actor to play John, I'm like, yes, that's my princess. The Winchesters just really endeared me to him is the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem. And the funny part is that through this entire episode, you have various angels and stuff being like, we gotta kill John Winchester. And I'm like, yeah, we do have to kill John Winchester. I don't see the problem.
But then it's like, oh my God, but that's my princess. But no, he's not, because I hate him.
Yeah. I like how in the wiki it says they sit down for an uncomfortable conversation because Sam and Dean say that they are plumbers and or scrap metal dealers. And Mary's like, she's trying to get them to leave. She's like, okay, cool. Like, we have to eat dinner. Like, bye. And John is like, oh, like, can you stay for dinner? Now, granted, when we saw them earlier, they were making soup for dinner. So I don't know how you're going to extend that soup unless you made a lot of soup. Like, it was two bowls of soup.
Listen, just add some chicken stock to that. It's fine.
Yeah, I don't know. And he's like, no, like, I really want to get to know people from Mary's side of the family. And she's like, so John leaves the room because the phone rings. And Mary's like, you gotta go. You gotta leave me alone. The last time you were here, a demon showed up and killed my parents. So, no. And they're like, okay, we're here because John is in danger. Now, and I'm like, I'm assuming they're trying to kill John because killing her would be harder. I don't know. But, okay. They're like, John is in danger. We're trying to help. And she's like, in danger from what? And she's like, is it a demon? Whatever. And they're like, well, no. And she's like, from what? And they're like, something different. An angel. And she's like, oh, what? Those don't exist. And then, and they're like, well, they do. And she's like, you're telling me that I just found out angels exist and one is trying to target me and my husband. That's crazy work. And they're like, you have to just trust her. You have to just trust us. And Dean's like, I will explain everything, but we need to leave now. And Mary's like, okay, fine, I guess. And she's like, how am I going to explain this to John? And then they're like, wait, where is John? Lo and behold, he has left the house. Because in the middle of this conversation, John was on the phone. And it sounded like he was on the phone with his employer, whose name is Mr. Woodson. He works at a garage. He fixes cars. And it sounds like Mr. Woodson is laying him off. And there's bad economic times, and he's laying him off. And he's like, let me just go there. Can we talk it out? Whatever. So apparently he has left to go talk to his boss, and he didn't tell her, even though she was in the other room, and he just wrote on the notepad that he would be back. I don't know why he didn't do that. He did that, but okay. Especially because he had guests over, but okay, I guess he was freaking out. So, and that scene cuts to, it wasn't his boss talking to him on the phone. It was Anna voice changing herself using AI. No, because she's an angel.
An AIngel. Sorry.
Boo.
I'm sorry. Anna, as played by Adrian Brody.
Please. Okay, so John shows up at the garage, and it's dark. There's not really anybody there. And then he finds his boss dead under a car with his eyes blown out, like what happens to angels. Which I'm like, why did she have to kill the boss? But okay, like, maybe he wasn't. Okay, fine, whatever. And he's like, what the hell? And Anna starts attacking him. At this moment was a moment where I got mad at this episode, because I'm like, you're an angel. I've seen angels smite people. I've seen angels kill people on contact. You don't have to do this whole fight scene. You could have killed him in 10 seconds. But again, we needed it for the plot, so I guess. And he's attacked, and then the brothers and Mary show up. And Anna and Mary start throwing hands. And you get to see Mary, you know, kind of as a hunter, whatever. And you can tell that she doesn't want to do this in front of her husband, but because he doesn't know. And the girls are fighting in very, like, 2000s girls are fighting style. That's really the only way I can describe it.
Cat fight.
It's very, cat fight. And you're like, again, this angel could just touch her and kill her. Why are we doing this? But okay, we're trying to show that Mary is badass, I guess. And at one point, Mary, like, shoves a crowbar into Anna, and Anna just pulls it out. Again, she's kind of a diva, and she just pulls it out, and she's like, yeah, that's not going to work on an angel. And Mary's like, fuck.
She's like, well, all right, fuck me, all right.
But they went into this with a plan, because at that point, Sam is like, don't worry, girls. All I needed to do was distract you. And you can see that he has painted a sigil on the wall with his blood and to banish Anna. And then, so now Mary is looking very shell-shocked, and she's like, oh my god, now my husband knows I'm a hunter. What the hell?
Yeah, and John is weirded the fuck out.
Yeah. Also, this episode is the episode where they call Castiel the little nerdy dude with wings. I think maybe the first time. Not sure. Also, Sam does call his mom beautiful out loud. And I'm like, don't be weird.
There's a scene earlier, like, when they're at their house and Sam's sitting there and he's just staring at Mary, and John's like, are you okay? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. You're just so beautiful. And Dean's like, he means that in, like, a family way. Like, It's been so long since he's seen Mary, and she's just grown up to be very beautiful. And he's like, dude, fuck, come on.
It's so unnecessary.
Honestly, here's the problem. I actually thought that was really sweet.
It was, like, really sweet, but then they made it weird immediately after. Like,
yeah, I think this show, one of its problems is that it tries not to take itself too seriously. So sometimes you get moments that are very heartfelt, and it feels necessary to point out, oh, hey, you sicko, you could have thought of it this way, but we are just not, like, that wasn't the point.
It's like, okay,
I understand if your fan base is full of Winchesters shippers, I understand why you might do that, but, like, you have to be able to say, like, sit with some sincerity for a moment that isn't just guys sharing bro feelings.
Yeah, well, we're talking about Supernatural, so that's not gonna happen. Also, Dean has a bit of moment with Anna in this scene where she's like, I really don't want to hurt you or kill you or whatever, and he's like, well, we're past that point, because if you remember, they fucked.
Yeah. They fucked in the backseat of a car, which I don't feel like is as glamorous as people make it sound.
Yeah. Well, back in the day, cars were way bigger.
That is true. And there also wasn't, like, the seats were way less ergonomic, so it was more flat, I guess.
Yeah. Although, Jensen Ackles is a very large person, so even in the back of a classic car, that was cramped.
Yeah.
Anyway, we can't get into that. If you ever are wondering, you could just look up Jensen Ackles' golden ratio.
Don't even.
Oh, God. Anyways, I still think about my friend from college who was like, he's the only white man who I would get with.
That's crazy.
I love her. Shout out to Natalie if she's listening. I miss her dearly.
Oh my gosh.
So they are now in the Impala with their parents in the front and them in the back, which is hilarious in itself. And Mary and John is like, so it's like demons and monsters are real, and this is what, and you've been doing this your whole life. And she's like, yeah, I have. And he's like, and you just didn't want to tell me. And they're like, well, it's complicated, whatever. And at one point, John is like, don't make me pull this car over or turn this car around. Like, yeah. And they're having kind of like a full family moment.
They're like arguing because he's like, why would you do this? Like, why didn't you tell me all this stuff? Did you guys know about this? And they're both like, yeah, we've been doing it forever. And then Mary says something snide, and then they all start arguing, and he goes, shut up! Don't make me turn this car around.
Which is really funny. But also really sad at the same time, because they never get to be a family like this. And then we get to the fortified Campbell family shelter, which apparently they just had somewhere, where Mary is like, yeah, my family's had this in our family for generations, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hey, what about the bunker? But we haven't gotten to those seasons yet. We've, this is kind of a safe house. It's protected against this and that. We have salt and all this kind of stuff. And they're making sigils, they're whatever. And John's like, well, how can I help? And Dean's like, we've got this. And John's like, no, like, I want to help. And so then Dean teaches John how to make a sigil, which that timeline, Dean has now taught his father what his father taught him. Much to unpack. Although the angel sigils, his father didn't teach him. I think Cass did.
Yeah, but close in the same kind of vibe. Because Dean's also kind of trying to, like, not teach this to John. Because I think he just is like, oh god, if I get him involved in this, then I'm part of the problem.
Yeah, which is what happens right after this. So Sam comes up and, like, apologizes about everything. And John is, like, kind of taken aback. And John is like, why did your parents, like, let you anywhere near hunting? That's so irresponsible. And who the hell does that to a kid? And what kind of irresponsible bastard lets a child anywhere near the number it must have done on your head? And you're hearing this from John, and I'm like, I need to kill him! Like, the whole time you're like, ah!
No, the problem too is it's like, obviously I hate John Winchester, don't get it twisted, I fucking hate John Winchester, but I also think it's so sad because it's like, you see this man who cares so much about his family and so much about, like, what's right, only for him to get, like, twisted so bad after his wife dies. Like, it's so tragic.
You're like, oh, fuck. And the two boys are sitting there. Imagine growing up with John Winchester as your father, and then you have John Winchester saying this to you. I'd have to kill myself after that. I'd be like, fuck. This is not good for my healing. And Sam goes into this whole speech about how he's like, I felt the same way for a long time. I hated him for a long time. But I sympathize with my dad, and I realize what happened to him and his wife dying, and he did the best he could for us, and he died before I could tell him that I understood him and that I loved him. So this is clearly Sam getting to say this to his father when he didn't get to, which is kind of sweet, but at the same time I'm like, he does not deserve your forgiveness, Sam. We cut to Anna in a field, and she summons an angel, and it's an angel we haven't seen before. But again, this is the past, so it could be anybody's vessel. And she's like, hey, Uriel. And you're like, oh my god, it's Uriel, who, if you know, in the present is dead. Different vessel this time. Interestingly enough, they choose an actor who is also black to be Uriel. So
I feel like it would have been crazy if they had whitewashed him in the past. So I'm kind of like, yeah,
they
let's
do shit like that later when they're like, yeah, Cass is a woman.
Well, okay, yeah, but being a woman and being whitewashed is two very different things.
Yeah,
because one is cool and woke and one is bad.
Yeah. Uriel notices and he's like, huh, you're not the Anna from my time. Like, what's kicking? What's going on? And she's like, hey, so in the future, Sam and Dean try to kill you. So we're going to go kill them. And he's like, all right, Diva, I'll help you.
He's like, yes, I love smiting.
He's like, finally. And we cut back to Dean. And he's talking to Mary. And Mary's like, okay, it's been long enough. You said you were going to explain what the fuck is going on. This is an insane conversation because, again, butterfly effect. But Dean reveals to her that he's like, we are actually your sons. And she doesn't believe him. And he says a bunch of stuff. He's like, you know, when we were sick, you would make us tomato rice soup. And instead of a lullaby, you would sing Hey Jude to us and this and that. And he's like, I remember this stuff because Sam was more of a baby. And you're like, oh.
The Hey Jude lullaby, that had the fandom in a fucking chokehold.
Oh,
Me too.
My God.
Like, I still can't hear that song without thinking about Dean and
Winchester.
Mary. It's so dark.
Yeah. She's like, wait, like, I raised you guys to be hunters? And then Dean has to be like, actually, no, you didn't. You never had the chance to. You were killed by a demon exactly 6 months after Sam was born. And you need to not go near the nursery on that day. And you need to just take Sam and go. And that's when Sam enters the room. And he's like, that's not going to be good enough. The demon's going to find you wherever you go. And he's like, the only way to solve this is that you have to leave John and prevent us from being born. And Mary's like, no, I'm not going to do that. She's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And they're like, she's like, I don't want you guys to not exist. And they're like, trust us. We'd rather not have been born than, you know, be dead. And she's like, she starts crying and she's like, well, we already can't solve that problem because I'm already pregnant. And Dean and Sam are like, fuck. Which also is crazy because that means that, like, Dean is in two places in this timeline. He is both standing there and also in his mother's womb in this moment. But we can't get into that. Also, this show many a time gets into the Winchester brothers telling a woman what to do with their baby to save the world. This is not the first nor the last time this will happen.
The fun thing, I feel like they're not even, like, pro-choice. They're pro-abortion.
No, and the crazy thing is that what did I wrote down abortions by Anna.
An abortion. So true. Yes.
That's the other thing where I'm like, can't they just ask their mom to use birth control?
Okay.
Like,
also, I'm sorry, them being like, okay, just don't because knowing when Sam is born, just be like, don't have sex between the months of this and this.
Yeah.
Just hold it. Keep it in.
Yeah. Just, I don't know, get a bunch of Plan B. Like,
girl, it's 1978.
I don't know. I also think when they're like, leave John, and I'm like, yeah, actually, girl, you should. He sucks. I'm looking at some of my notes and laughing. Anyways, so then John comes in the room and he's like, hey, some of the sigils that we drew are smudged now. Shit. And they're like, uh-oh, the holy oil we had, it disappeared. What do we do? So, okay, what I don't understand is in the wiki, it says that Anna planted the false story that the people now inside the Campbell shelter will kill him in the future. And I'm like, well, they do, though. Like, well, it's Cass who kills Uriel, not technically them, but, like, it is true.
It is them, yeah.
Like, okay. I will say this episode does have some MCU-ass dialogue. Like, he's like, I'm always happy to do some smiting. I'm like, all right, pack it up, Joss Whedon. Like, some of my notes, I did say things like MCU-ass dialogue. So then the house starts shaking. The windows start shattering. Anna and Uriel enter. They start fighting with the Winchesters. Again, this moment where you have to just suspend your disbelief because they're angels and they're fist fighting them. Okay. And Anna, I will say, Anna flings Mary, and you're like, oh god, she's pregnant with Dean. Shaken baby syndrome. That's why Dean
I don't think
like that.
I don't know. Yeah. It's so over. No, I was literally thinking that. I'm like, girl, you should not be fighting right now.
Yeah. Not to say that pregnant women can't do anything, but an angel flinging you halfway across the room is probably not great for the baby.
Like, that probably shouldn't, you probably shouldn't be doing that regardless of if you're pregnant or not, but I can't imagine it's, like, particularly helpful to be pregnant and doing that.
That's why Dean is like that. Anyway.
That gave him autism.
And it's not the vaccines. Do you think that John got them vaccines?
I think so.
Okay.
I feel like Mary definitely seems like someone who would be pro.
Okay, yeah.
I feel like maybe she wasn't vaccinated.
Yeah. Also, at this point, Anna kills Sam. And, quote, by impaling him with a piece of pipe. This will not be the first time that someone in Supernatural dies by being impaled on a piece of pipe.
Sam, get up.
Sam, girl. And Anna goes to kill Mary. And then suddenly, we see John Winchester. This John Winchester of the past show up, but he looks a little different. And we realize that it is now the Archangel Michael, who he has accepted into his body to use as his vessel. And he goes in and he smites Anna. Anna's gone. R.I.P. Anna. May she rest in peace. It's pretty fucking ugly. It's crazy style. And he snaps Uriel away, and Uriel's like, well, that's none of my business. And he touches Mary, and she's unconscious. She falls to the floor. Again, she's pregnant, and you want Dean to be alive, so, like, maybe don't let her fall all the way to the floor. But, like, okay, fine, again. And Michael turns to Dean, and he's like, hey, girl, we've needed to talk for a while. And I think we're assuming that this is the Michael of the future.
That's what I think, yeah.
Yeah. And Dean is like, you need to fix Sam right now. And Michael's like, okay, I will, but we do need to chat. And Dean's like, what did you do to John? And Michael's like, I gave him the opportunity to save his wife, and he agreed. And Dean's like, I thought I was your one and only vessel. And Michael's like, well, you're my true vessel, but you're not the only one. It's a bloodline that goes back all the way to Cain and Abel. And, you know, our destinies are intertwined since ancient times. And I'm like, okay, point of interest here, point of inquiry. Isn't, like, technically, if we're going by the Bible, isn't, like, all of humanity's, like, connected to Cain and Abel? So,
that's what I was thinking. Also, I think it's kind of crazy because, like, if it is blood-based, then why does it matter which one? It's like, why doesn't Lucifer go to Dean and be like, hey girl, hey diva?
Well, because he wasn't fed of the blood since he was like,
I guess that's true. Yeah. Never mind then.
But it's also like, it's to be able to be strong enough to house an angel. And I'm like, okay, so what makes Dean strong enough to house Michael then if he hasn't been drinking the demon blood? Again, the show doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. But, okay, we've established that little fucking piece of lore. I think that's also very funny, considering that he meets Cain later.
As played by Timothy Omenson.
Dean's like, you need to take your beef with your brother to another planet, and you need to leave this one alone. And Michael's like, you have this all wrong. I don't want to kill Lucifer any more than you want to kill Sam, which is a crazy statement to make given, you know, how Dean and Sam's relationship. And he's like, this is what God's commanded, and I'm a good son. And you can see Dean, who is now deconstructed, is like, And there's some good lines in this scene. Dean is like, you know, in my experience, blindly following your father's orders is a dead-end street. And you're like, ooh, he kind of ate with that one. And he says, it's my belief that I have the right to choose what I do with my own unimportant life. Because Michael says something about having an unimportant life. And Michael's like, well, you're wrong. Free will's an illusion. And, you know, this plan is playing out perfectly. You know, I know you'll eventually say yes. And he's like, you know, I'm gonna transport Sam back to the present unharmed. I'll wipe John and Mary's memories of this whole thing. And Dean's like, no, please don't do that. Like, I need to stop this from happening. And he's like, you know, and he's like, no, Mary's gonna walk into that nursery. She's gonna die. This is all gonna go as planned. And he's like, you know, Michael's like, well, I'll see you soon. And suddenly Dean is back in the present. And this is the point where we have stated the point of the show of, like, what is free will, which I think is interesting. And also him having that conversation with a younger version of his dad's face, but on Michael. Crazy
Fucked
work.
Up.
Crazy work. Crazy work. This is also where he says the 6 degrees of heaven bacon line.
Yeah, okay, this scene is so fucking funny, because he's like, oh, it always had to be you, because, like, you descended from Cain and Abel, and all this, blah, 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 and Dee goes, oh, great, the 7 degrees of heaven bacon. I'm like, that is actually so fucking funny.
They kind of ate that.
That is so good.
Also,
Shit.
him saying, get some therapy, pal, I'm like, imagine Dean Winchester telling you to get therapy.
Dude,
that would kill me dead.
Because he's like, well, I don't want to kill my brother. And he's like, okay, get therapy. Don't talk to me about it. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah. So we're back in the present. We're in this motel room. Sam and Dean are there. And they're both like, oh, fuck. Like, what's happened? And then suddenly, Castiel shows up. He looks just absolutely fucked up, battered. He's not standing up straight. And Sam, he showed up right behind Sam. Sam turns around. Sam and Dean are, like, holding him up. And they put him on the bed. He's, like, collapsed there. And Dean just pours drinks for himself and Sam. And he's like, well, a toast to Team Free Will. 1 ex-blood junkie, 1 dropout with $6 to his name, and Mr. Comatose. And they toast, they drink, and, you know, they're like, it's really annoying that they keep telling us that we're gonna say yes, like, fuck this, whatever. And then we have a scene that we've talked about before on this podcast. We're back in 1978. We see now it's Mary. She's really pregnant with Dean, and she's looking over a crib. She's talking with John about how they got the crib at a secondhand sale, really cheap and whatever. And she and John's like, oh, like, where did you find this? And we see that it's an angel figurine right next to the crib. And she's like, you know, I don't know. The idea just came to me. And I think it's nice that angels are watching over him. I just have this feeling. And after John leaves, she's like, oh, I like got a big kick. And she's like, oh, Dean's a troublemaker already. And she's like, oh, well, angels are watching over you. And then the episode ends. And you're supposed to just... it's supposed to be ominous because angels watching over him is, like, a bad thing. But also, that also means Castiel. So...
oh, it's so sick. This episode is so, like... It's one of those ones where, like, I don't like time travel, but I'm also like, fuck.
Yeah.
I think any of the stuff with John and Mary, especially when it's like they tie it back to season 1.
Yeah.
And like, oh, it's so sick and twisted.
Yeah. I do also like how his mom in the 70s has a hairstyle from the 2000s.
Okay, to be fair, it's more 70s. It's bigger than anyone else had in the 2000s, so I can respect that.
It's like, well, an effort was made.
She did have some big barrel curls. At least she didn't have, like, beach waves, because I feel like that's what... beach waves and a balayage, because I feel like that's what everyone had in 2010.
Yeah. Oh, also, we're incorrect. It is Anna who kills Uriel. So her recruiting him in the past is a lie.
Oh, it was Anna who killed Uriel in present day. Okay, yeah. OT, so... well, yeah, I guess she's a liar. I'm sad that Anna is, like, exploded, though, because I feel
she serves.
She kind of got the Joe treatment in a way where it's like, oh, you're setting up something really cool with this character. We gotta kill her off.
Yeah, well, and Unfortunately, this is something that will keep happening.
Every time there's a woman that you get interested in, don't.
Yeah. Also, horrible Freudian moment in this episode, and that we do find out later that Dean's reason that he loves cherry pie is because of something that his mom made for him. And then this episode does start with cherry pie playing while he's looking at strippers, and then the episode is about his mom. So,
oh, gross.
Yeah. It's supposed to be like, oh, Dean likes cherry pie and strippers, but it's like, well, why does he like cherry pie? Yeah. So, there's that.
That's not a diva moment, I will say.
Yeah, it's really not a diva moment. This was written by Sarah Gamble. This was written by two women, Sarah Gamble and Nancy Weiner. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, they've written a lot of episodes that are really good, that have, like, pretty, all things considered, pretty good dialogue.
Yeah.
And, like, it's just so funny, because I'm like, what happened? What happened with the Sarah Gamble seasons? Like, what was going on there? Watch them this time around and be like, wait, these are actually good.
Yeah. Also, the next episode is a Ben Edlund episode, so...
I know. So, speaking of Ben Edlund being the writer of this episode, let's get into it. It is Season 5, Episode 14. It is called My Bloody Valentine. That's right, it's a Valentine's Day episode. This episode is coming out in March for us, so it's a little late, but that's okay. I don't think anybody's listening to this show expecting it to be, like, perfectly on time. If that was the case, I'm so sorry. Let's hop right into it. This is I liked this episode. I thought it was fun, but I don't have many more thoughts than that. So I think
it's a good episode because Castiel is there.
Yeah, that is true.
We get a lot of good moments between the boys and Cass, just in general, of like classic moments between them, and that's what makes it fun. Yeah. Then there's some other scenes. Yeah.
It's like, come on. Okay, we're gonna get into it. I'm gonna go through this one nice and fast. We're gonna have a nice brisk pace. Got it? We're all agreed. Okay. So we start cold open. There's these two like pretty young people, and the guy, who we find his name is Russell, is like, oh my gosh, like, so our first date, huh? And the girl, she's a young woman, her name's Alice, she's wearing a silly little knit hat, and she's like, yeah, I had a lot of fun. And he's like, well, maybe we could do something again on Sunday, which is Valentine's Day. And he's like, I just don't want to be alone, And she's like, yeah, I get it. And they lean in and they have this really sweet kiss. And then they start kissing a little bit more. And she's like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want you to think I'm like the kind of girl who like gives it up on the first date. And he's like, no, I don't think that. I really like respect you or whatever. And it's like, it's really sweet. But like they start making out and they're like, okay, like, you know what? Yes. And they go inside to Alice's house and they're like making out and they're like undressing each other. And there's a part that's really funny where he leans back and he's like, I respect you so much. And I'm like, so true.
It was very woke for 2010.
Mm-hmm. They start undressing. Well, this is the era when woke first started.
When woke actually had meaning.
Yeah. So they start undressing and they're like making out and they're kind of going crazy. And then Alice is like kissing his neck and then you hear her take a bite and she leans back and there's blood all over her mouth and she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I just bit you. And he's like, no, like, it's okay. So she goes back and bites him again and then he starts biting her and they're both covered in blood and making out. And like, I know somebody was getting off on that.
Can I say something controversial about this scene? Can I say something controversial? I think cannibalism is love is only fun when it's gay people.
Oh, see, I get it. I get what you're saying. But also, I kind of was down with this scene. I was like, okay, I'm having fun.
No, I was also having fun because I do, and this is something I did enjoy about this episode, I did like Supernatural getting back to being horror, and especially the body horror of it. Well, that's not my personal cup of tea. It is where Supernatural tends to shine, and they really got back to that, and they got back to like the horror of this thing.
Yeah,
and I was
this
like,
episode's kind of like nasty.
This episode is nasty.
It's a little nasty. So we cut well, we see them, like, going, like, biting each other, whatever, and, like, there's, like, blood all over this little, card that Alice has on her fridge that's, like, a little cherub, and there's blood covering it, and that's what we see as we hear them, like, literally eating each other, and then we get the title card. And the next scene starts, and Sam is wearing, like, a tux. Not a tux, like a suit. Oh my god. Just a tux. Imagine an FBI agent shows up and they're wearing a tux. So Sam's wearing a suit.
Wait. And that would kind of eat.
That would be kind of hilarious. So Sam's like, and, like, you found them here? And we see this other girl he's talking to. She is Alice's roommate. And she's like, yeah, I was the one who found them. And he's like, and they were dead when you found them? And she's like, well, yes, but no. I mean, I think so, mostly. Russell, he was still chewing a little bit. And he's like, oh, gross. And she's like, yeah. And he's like, well, was Alice acting weird before any of this happened? Like, is there any strange behavior? And she's like, no, like, Alice was, like, a really nice, like, she was a good girl. She was, like, nice, like, really nice. Like, she never drank or, like, she never cursed. She still had a promise ring, if you know what I mean. And he's like, oh, so she was, like, a virgin. And she's like, yeah. And, like, this was the first date she's been on in a really long time. And it sucks because she was so excited and she really liked him. And I don't know how they would just eat each other. Like, it's crazy. I don't understand it. And Sam's like, T, I get you. We cut to Sam opening the door to a motel room that Dean is in. And he's like, well, there's no signs of ghosts. There is no sulfur smell, no nothing. So I don't think it was demons. And Dean's like, well, you were lucky that you did that because I went to the coroner and it was freaking nasty. Both of, like, they had like literally engorged themselves. Like, they had the fullest stomachs I have ever seen in my life. And Sam's like, okay, well, that sounds good. I'm going to stay here, do more research, and you can go ahead. And Dean's like, what? And he's like, Sam's like, well, it's Valentine's Day. And Dean's like, yeah? And Sam's like, this is, like, your favorite holiday. It's like, what do you call it? Unattached Drifter Christmas? And Dean's like, okay, shit. Well, I just don't feel like it this year. I don't know. I'm not feeling the holiday spirit. And Sam's like, dude, this is like when a dog doesn't eat. Like, that's when you know, like, something's wrong. And Dean's like, okay, well, that was a remarkably patronizing concern, duly noted. I'm fine. Let's just get back to work. And I'm sorry. Dean being like, wow, okay, fuck me, I guess. Shit.
He kind of got him. And also, like, there's a couple moments of Sam being a real asshole in this episode. Granted, there are some reasons for it later, but also the way that he's talking to that girl earlier, like, he's like, apparently they were both pretty excited. I'm like, can you be a little kinder to her family member who's sad right now? Like, Jesus Christ, Sam, usually you're the nice one. And then he's kind of an ass to Dean at this moment. I'm like,
oh, I don't know if he's an ass. I think he's just giving him shit.
He's just giving him shit, but also, like, they're going through some stuff. You could be a little nicer, Sam. Maybe that's my baby girl, Dean. Be nicer.
I feel like you're like talking about Sam like he's a real person. Like, when people in fandom are like, Sam's a bad person. I need Dean in boxes. We need to get him out of here.
I need Dean in boxes.
We literally made that joke in the last episode. Okay.
Guys, if you don't know about the Raymond controversy in Animal Crossing in 2020,
it's so funny.
Don't look it up. It'll hurt your brain cells.
Yeah. So then we cut. There's these two guys and they're going back and forth and they're at the office and their names are Jim and Brad. And Jim keeps, like, checking his phone and he keeps texting his girlfriend. Her name is Janice. And Brad's like, dude, you're totally whipped. And he's like, no, she just likes to know where I am. And he's like, yeah, because she wants to make sure you're whipped. You've known her for like a week. Come on, dude. We need to finish this, like, work project. And I know it's late, but we have to finish it. And he's like, I'm not whipped, blah, 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 whatever. And then a woman in a red dress walks in and she's crying. And she's like, where were you? And Jim is like, oh, Janice, I'm so sorry. And she's like, well, did you choose work over me? And he's like, I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. And Brad's like, oh my God, whipped. And then Janice pulls out like a revolver fucking pistol and just shoots him right there.
She kind of
doesn't even look at him.
Yeah, she's just like, oops, boom, and then gets it. And then she's like, so anyway. And I'm like, she kind of ate that a little bit.
Okay, I have to disagree with you.
Like, she didn't eat that in the killing somebody, but it was funny.
I mean, it was funny. That's true.
The timing is really funny.
The timing is funny. But then, so Jim is like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Nothing's ever going to keep us apart. And she's like, there's always going to be something keeping us apart. Work, your job, your family. And he's like, yeah, and like sleep and all that stuff. And she's like, and now probably prison. And Jim's like, well, I have an idea about how we can stay together forever. Suicide warning. Then they shoot themselves in a double suicide. So that's exciting. Sam and Dean, they're like, all right, we gotta figure out what the fuck is going on. So they go to the hospital again, and as they're walking down the halls, they pass this guy who's in a suit and has this briefcase, and he is like leaving the coroner's office. And Sam looks at him and is like, oh, that was weird, but whatever. Like, he doesn't say anything. And Dean's like, are you okay? And Sam's like, yeah, everything's fine. So they go in, and no, my favorite character of this episode is now introduced. They meet the coroner, and his name is Dr. Corman, and he's like this kind of older guy. He's a little chubby, and he's like, all right, so you guys are here to like do this investigation, right? Well, all the organs have already been Tupperwared up, so just make sure if you open the fridge, make sure you re-refrigerate them. Thank you. And he puts on his little hat and his jacket and leaves, and I love him. He's hilarious. So Sam and Dean start like looking at the different organs that are in little separate containers, and Sam's like, you know what I'm noticing? There's some stuff on these hearts. Like, there's these little marks, and they look like they're Enochian. It kind of reminds me of, like, what Cass put on our ribs. And Dean's like, okay, T. So I'm going to call Cass because he might know something. And he calls Cass, and he's like, oh, yeah, we're in this, like, St. James Medical Center. And before he's even done the sentence, the camera pans over and Cass is standing like right in front of him, and he's like, I'm here now. And Dean's like, yeah, I get that. And Cass goes, right, I'm gonna hang up now.
This is a classic scene. If you've ever seen like a screenshot of Destiel, it's usually of them looking at each other on the phone.
Yeah,
in this scene, like it's a big one.
Yeah,
Castiel's in the Valentine's Day episode.
Yippee! And he and Dean get to go on a fun date later.
No, literally.
So Cass walks over and he looks at everything that they were looking at. And he's like, okay, so I think this was put there by, how would you describe it? What you humans have falsely called Cupid. And they're like, oh, wait, like the baby? Like the fat kid in a diaper? And Cass goes, oh, well, they're not incontinent. He's like, no, they're a cherub. They're actually an order of, an order of angels. And they get sent to, like, make pairings and make sure that people who are supposed to get together, bloodlines and all that. This one must have gone rogue. We have to stop it. So they're like, okay, T. The girlies, they go to, like, it's basically like a singles bar.
The three of them in their fucking FBI suits at a singles bar on Valentine's Day it's a choice.
It's so sad. It's so tragic, but they're sitting there, and Dean and Sam are like, oh, this is so embarrassing. Like, why are we here? And Cass is like, well, this is the kind of place that a Cupid would be drawn to, because there's all this, like, pent-up, like, reproductive urges. And Dean is, like, sitting there kind of listening, and Cass goes, "Are you gonna eat that?" And we look down, and Dean has a hamburger, and Dean's like, no, I'm not really hungry. And Cass reaches over and just takes it, and he's like, all right, and he starts eating Dean's burger, and they're both like, what? Because Cass never eats, so they're like, what are you doing? And then Cass is like, oh, the Cupid is here. I just think it's great that they're on a date at a singles bar sharing a burger. That's so romantic.
It's almost like they had an indirect kiss.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
He didn't actually go to eat the burger, sadly.
But... yeah. Destiel indirect kiss when?
It happens often, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. They do share flasks more than once. Cass is like, oh my gosh, the Cupid is here. You guys, meet me in the back of this place. And then he's gone. And you hear the sound of, like, wings fluttering. So the boys, like, run out behind the building. And Cass is standing there with his arms up. And he's like, I have him tethered. And he starts saying these words in Enochian. And this guy appears who's naked, probably in his, like, late 30s or early 40s. And he's like, oh my gosh, and he runs over and gives Dean a big hug, like, from behind, and lifts him up off his feet, and Dean's like, oh, shit, okay. And then he runs over and gives Cass a hug, and then he hugs Sam, and Dean's like, what the fish? And Cass is like, well, this is like a cherub handshake. So, yeah, and Dean's like, well, I don't like it, and Cass is like, nobody likes it.
Their little banter in this episode is so cute.
No, it's so funny. And Cupid is like, okay, oh my gosh, hey divas, what do you need? And Cass is like, well, we need to know why you're, like, killing people. Yeah, and Dean's like, yeah, do you know that all of the people you've made fall in love have died? And he's like, oh my god, what? And he starts sobbing, and Cass walks over to him and is like, hey, like, let's just talk it out. And he grabs Cass and pulls him into a hug, and he's like, I just love, and if that's wrong, I don't want to be right. I don't understand why any of this is happening, blah, blah, blah. And Cass is like, yeah, honestly, gonna be so real, girl, I have no idea what you're talking about. I do not understand what you're saying, but okay. And so he starts, like, trying to, like, apologize, because he's like, I had no idea, like, none of this is right. And he's like, I don't know what happened there. All I do is follow my orders. Like, they tell me that these people need to fall in love, and I go make them fall in love. And Cass is like, okay, I think he's telling the truth. And Cupid's like, oh my god, yippee! And Dean's like, okay, well, who's been telling you to come here? Like, where do you get your orders from? And he's like, oh, well, heaven sends me my orders. You know, like, there's some relationships, like preserving bloodlines, doing all this stuff that I have to do. And they're like, oh, that's, like, kind of crazy. And he's like, well, you know, some are very high profile, like John and Mary Winchester. That was a special assignment. And they're like, wait, you made our parents fall in love? And he's like, well, I didn't. And it's crazy because I know that was, like, a harder case because the two of them could not even stand each other for a minute. But after we were done with them, love. And Dean's like, well, both of them are dead now, so awesome, thank you. And Cupid's like, okay, I'm sorry, but, like, you guys had to be born, so, like, somebody had to do it. But, I mean, you know, they ended up being, like, the perfect couple when we were done with them. And Dean gets pissed off and goes to punch him, and there is literally no effect. Like, it's basically like he was punching metal. And he leans back and he's like, oh, ouch, fuck.
I hate to say it, it's very Bella punching Jacob moment.
So true. And the Cupid gets upset and disappears. And Sam is like, dude, what the fuck? You just punched Cupid. And Dean's like, I punched a dick, okay? He was being a dick. And Sam's like, okay, you have been having a problem recently. Are we going to talk about that? And Dean's like, no, we're not, and walks away. So the girls are like, okay, something is not right. Like, we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what's actually going on. We then cut. We are back in the morgue. And Dr. Corman, the same doctor from earlier, is talking to Sam. And he's like, so you wanted me to let you know if there were any more, like, bizarre deaths? Well, meet Lester Finch. And we see a guy who's, dead. He's on the exam table, and he has this big distended stomach. And the doctor's telling Sam about it, and he's like, well, he actually used to be pretty chunky, and then he got some weight loss surgery a while ago, so he's lost a bunch of weight, but something happened, and he went home and binged himself on Twinkies, and he kept eating until the band around his stomach burst, and then he just kept going and was jamming the Twinkies down his gullet after his stomach was totally full, and was using a toilet brush. And I'm like, that's crazy, because a toilet brush is not the optimal tool to do that with. But Sam is like, that's terrible. Like, what do you make of it? And the doctor is like, well, I'd say it was a very peculiar thing to do. I love this guy.
Crazy. I love him.
He's so funny. But he seems like weirded out. Like, clearly this is not normal. And Sam's like, right, something is happening. Something's tea. So Sam also notices that the doctor takes a sip of this, like, a flask. And Sam's like, oh, should you really be drinking on the job? But he doesn't say it. He just kind of thinks it. Okay, so Sam goes out and he calls Dean. And he's outside of the hospital, and he's like, okay, so this guy, as far as we know, didn't have that same mark. So this was not the cherub. This was something else. So it's not, I don't think it's related to that. And Dean's like, well, I've checked some police records, and there have been 8 suicides and 19 ODs in the last few days, which is way more than the seasonal average. So Sam and Dean, they go back and forth, and they're like, okay, like, clearly Cupid wasn't helping, but something else is going on. And Sam suddenly, like, they hang up, and it's like, all right, we'll work this out. Sam gets a headache, and he looks over, and the guy in the suit we saw earlier carrying the briefcase in the hospital, he sees that guy, and he's like, something's up. I gotta do something. So he runs over and pushes this guy up against a wall. And he's like, I know you're a demon. I can smell it. And he pulls out the demon knife and slices him, and he starts sizzling. And the demon's like, Winchester, and kind of tussles away and gets away and starts booking it, but he drops his briefcase. Sam looks over and sees him run away, and looks down at the knife that's covered with the demon blood and sees his reflection in it, and then is like, oh my god, no, like, what am I doing? And he wipes it off, which is like, ooh, Sam having a weird reaction to demon blood? Something's weird going on here. Something is weird. So Sam goes back to the motel room, and he's got the briefcase, and they're like, okay, why the fuck are demons involved, and what is this? So they're like, okay, we're gonna open this briefcase, and hopefully it doesn't, like, explode or kill us. So they open it up, and this bright white light starts shining out, and then it slowly fades away. And then from behind them, Cass just appears and is like, oh, that's a human soul. And they turn around and they're like, whoa, what are you doing here? And Cass is like, yeah, that's a human soul, as he's taking a bite of a hamburger from like a fast food place. And Dean's like, wait, why do you have a hamburger right now? Like, since when did you get so into White Castle? And he's like, this is a clue. This is an important part of this, because this is not like a love situation. This is starvation. It's famine, as in the horseman famine. And Sam's like, I thought famine was like no food. Like, there's plenty of food here, clearly. And Cass is like, okay, that's true, but you can be famished from other stuff. So like food or love or drugs or attention or like stuff that people want. And this famine, it's not because there's a lack of the things that they want. It's because they hunger for it so much they go rabid. And Sam starts looking a little freaked out. And Dean's like, okay, but why are you affected? Like, you're an angel. And Cass is like, well, it's my vessel. Jimmy is hungry. He wants red meat because, like, I don't really eat. And then Cass quotes frickin' Revelations and is like, and then will come famine, riding on a black steed. He will ride into the land of plenty, and great will be the horseman's hunger, for he is hunger. His hunger will seep out and poison the air. And as he's saying this, it's played over a scene where a black Cadillac, pulls up to a restaurant. A bunch of guys like get out from, I think there's like another car there, and they get out and they're all wearing these black suits, and they start getting this guy out of the first car, out of the Cadillac, and he's this old as fuck guy, and they put him in a wheelchair, and they put an oxygen supply like up in his nose, and they go inside to this restaurant. And as soon as this old guy goes in, the people inside the restaurant begin like, they start like eating the food crazy style. They're all doing drugs. They're all like making out. Like, it's total debauchery. Then we cut back, and Cass is like, you know what? I bet that Lucifer, the reason there's demons here, Lucifer probably sent them to protect Famine and like help him get souls, because he is hungry for souls. And the demons are probably gonna like help him get full and get healthy so that he can do his job and march the land. And Dean's like, bro, Twinkie guy's soul was in the briefcase. That's who that was. Fuck. It's so over. We then cut back to this restaurant, and all the demons are like scurrying around doing stuff, and Famine is sitting there, and the demon who Sam apprehended earlier rolls up, and he's like, girl, you're never gonna guess who's in town. It's Lucifer's vessel. But look what I got. And he pulls out Sam's motel key that he lifted off of him. And Famine's like, okay, slay. So where's my soul from the one who loves cream cakes so much? And the demon's like, well, so tea is that the tea is that Sam kind of like got my ass and I dropped it, but I'll get you another one. And Famine's like, okay, well, I'm hungry now, so don't even worry about it. And then he summons the demon's soul and eats it. And he's like, delicious. Then we're at the motel again. Sam and Dean are like, okay, we gotta figure out how we can stop this guy. And Cass is like, okay, so you guys already fought a horseman, because if you'll recall, they fought the Horseman War. And Dean's like, okay, so we did find that guy, and he had on this, like, ring, and we cut his finger off and took the ring, and then he left. So we think that's, like, where his power comes from. And Cass is like, okay, that's awesome. I think Famine also probably has a ring, and as he's doing this, like, he's still eating. And I think at one point he takes a bite of the bag that the burger is in. Like, a bite of the paper.
He does. He does.
Is, like,
I will say I will respect Misha Collins in this moment because I know he had to eat a lot in this episode.
Yeah, like, because it's also, like, not, like, show eating. Like, he's actually eating.
He's chomping down. Also, I'm just saying that Cass and Dean match made in heaven because what does Cass eat when he suddenly wants to eat hamburgers? And that's the thing that Dean usually wants to eat. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's so funny, too, because he's eating this burger. I think it's earlier in the episode. He's eating a burger, and he goes, this makes me very happy. And Dean's like, girl, what the fuck? So Cass is like, okay, we got to get the ring. And Sam kind of wanders off, and he goes into the bathroom, and he's sweating, and he looks a little nasty. And he starts, like, he turns on the faucet and starts wiping water on his face, and is, like, trying to get a hold of himself. And Dean is, like, in the background, you see Dean and Cass, like, talking while Sam is, like, having a crash out. And Dean's like, what are you, the Hamburglar? And Cass is like, well, I've developed a taste for ground beef. This is all from the show. And Dean says, well, have you even tried to stop it? And Cass goes, I'm an angel. I can stop anytime I want.
They're so married couple in this episode. They're like so like
Sam is like, oh my god, it's so over for me. And they're like, ugh. Dina's like, you need to stop eating so much red meat. And at this point, Sam walks out and he's like, okay, you guys can go do that. I can't. It's gotten me. Like, Famine did something to me. And Dean's like, what do you mean? And he's like, I want demon blood again. I want it. And Dean's like, no, okay. That's not happening. Cass, you need to teleport him away. Like, send him literally anywhere that's not here. And Cass is like, well, he's already infected. Whatever happens, it'll just go with him. And Dean's like, okay, fuck. What do we do? And Sam's like, you need to go and get that ring and cut that dude's finger off. But you need to just leave me here. I can't come with you. You need to just lock me up. And Dean's like, okay, fine. So he puts Sam in handcuffs that's, like, attached to the sink so he can't leave and just kind of has to sit there. We then cut. Dean goes to the hospital and sees, like, the doctor's, the coroner's assistant. And he's like, hey, girl, is Dr. Corman here? And Marty's like, oh, Marty is the assistant's name. And he's like, oh, you haven't heard? After, like, he's been sober for 20 years. And then for some reason, he went home today and just drank until he died. And Cass is there with him and he goes, that's Famine. And Dean's like, okay, thank you so much. Give us a minute with the body. And Marty leaves. And Cass is like, his soul is still in the body. And Dean's like, okay, T, so we can wait here and, like, do a stakeout. And when the demons come to take the soul, we will follow him back to Famine. Yes. Okay, our plan is happening. We then cut. Dean and Cass are sitting in the Impala. It's gotten dark. And Cass has, like, another huge bag of, like, hamburgers and is chomping away. And he's like, la, 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 I love my hamburger. These make me very happy. And Dean's like, Jesus Christ, how many of those have you eaten? And he's like, well, probably about 100 at this point. And he's like, wow, you are so lucky you're an angel because you would be super, super dead right now if not. And Cass is like, you know, it's funny. Like, why haven't you been affected? Like, everyone else in this town is clearly affected, but not you. And Dean's like, well, I don't know. I mean, I just do what I want when I want. Like, if I want to drink, I drink. When I want sex, I go get it. Same thing with a sandwich or a fight. And Cass is like, so you're saying that you're well-adjusted? And Dean's like, oh, absolutely not. I am just well-fed.
This is such a first date conversation between them.
Yeah, it does feel so, like, it's like, this feels not like first date. This feels like third date behaviors.
Yeah, this is third date behavior. This is right before they would actually kiss, but that's not what happens. If there's a fanfic where they do kiss in this scene, let us know.
I feel like it is kind of like, you know, it's when you've started to sort of dig into what another person really thinks about stuff. Like, you can start asking real questions, but you don't want to push too hard because you're not quite sure what the vibes are yet. But as they're having this conversation, there's a dude who, like, runs out of the hospital. He's got a briefcase, and they're like, let's follow the car he's in. We cut back to the motel, and Sam is, like, crashing out. He's like, oh my god, I need some demon blood. And he's trying to break out of the handcuffs. And suddenly, he hears the motel room unlock. And he's like, oh my god, Dean and Cass, like, you're back. I don't think it worked. I'm still craving. And the door opens. And in walk two demons. And there's a man and a woman. And the woman is like, oh my god, hey girl, we need you alive. Let's go. So they go to grab Sam. The guy goes to take the handcuffs off, and Sam starts trying to beat the shit out of him, and he jumps on the girl and he stabs her with, like, some glass. And guess what he does? But he starts to take a little sippy sip, and she's trying to struggle away, and the other demon runs up to grab him, and Sam uses his powers to send this dude flying across the room. And he's like, wait your turn. I'm just like, damn, what the fuck?
I'm not gonna lie, I did kind of miss badass Sam a little
too.
bit. I was like, he's kind of serving.
He's so fun. Dean and Cass are like, okay, T, we've gone to this restaurant that they have made their home base. And they see a bunch of demons at the entrance. And he's like, okay, remember the plan? And Cass is like, yes, mama, I'm going to go in and stab him, cut his ring off, and then come back. Because if you go near him, you'll probably die. Dean is like, okay, I don't like this plan. Like, it feels dangerous. And Cass is like, okay, but, like, don't worry. I got this, baby. So he disappears, teleports. And Dean sits there for, like, a couple seconds, and then is like, okay, this is taking too long. So he's like, I'm worried about my baby daddy. So he gets out, and he goes to sneak into the restaurant. And he hears, like, this noise, and he looks over, and he sees that Cass is, like, on the ground, kneeled over this, like, pallet of raw meat, and is, like, stuffing it into his mouth. And Dean also sees all the other, like, people who are at the restaurant who are dead, and he's like, it's so over. And a bunch of demons suddenly swarm him and grab him and bring him to famine. And Cass is also just, like, so out of it. Like, he is not even paying attention. The knife, like, the demon knife is, like, on the ground, and he's like, whatever. Then Famine's like, oh my god, Dean Winchester, that's so crazy that you're here. I love America. Everyone here is so fat and hungry because hunger comes from the soul. And Dean's like, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's some subtle fat phobia here. So but I do agree that the American collective soul is struggling. So I'm like, yes, so true.
Yeah.
But
I would also say the depiction of Famine as a disabled guy in a motorized wheelchair, it's a choice.
It's an interesting choice. But he's also, like, really old too, so I'm just like, what's the message here? Like, what's happening?
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
See, I'm thinking, like, it should have been, like, a child ignorance and want kind of situation.
I don't know if I could have dealt with that, honestly. They do
creepy child a lot in this show.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just happy that he's not, like,
a sexy woman.
Like, Yeah, that's true. So Dean's like, right, okay, well, I'm not affected, so maybe I'm just built different. And Famine's like, yeah, I did notice that, because most of the time when girlies are in my presence, they just, like, totally lose their shit. And he walks over and puts his hand on Dean's chest, and Dean looks like he's in pain. And Famine's like, ooh, you're not affected because there's just this nothingness inside of you that you can't fill and I can't fill. You are broken and defeated and you cannot win, but you keep going through the motions. You are not hungry because you are already dead inside.
He kind of ate him up.
No,
like,
he did.
And pun intended with that. Pun intended.
And as this is happening, who arrives but Sam, whose mouth is covered with blood, and he's like, let him go. And Dean's like, oh my god, he totally drank demon blood. Sam, stop the violence, stop the nonsense. And the demons go towards Sam, and Famine's like, okay, no one is gonna touch my sweet little boy. He literally calls him his sweet little boy, because he's the vessel. He's like, do not hurt my sweet little boy.
That's how we talk about him. That's crazy.
No, literally. But he's like, oh, Sam, you enjoyed the snack I sent. And Sam is upset, and he's like, wait, I thought Lucifer was the one who sent the demons to get me. And Famine's like, girl, no, I sent them because obviously I'm working for Satan, you dummy. And you can have as much blood as you want. Unlike all these other fools who are like dying from stuff, like from eating too much, I'm here to save you. I'm here to help you. So you'll actually be fine. And like, you can get super strong. It'll be awesome. And Sam is like, looks really conflicted. And then he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And starts using his powers and like exorcises all these demons. And while he's distracted, Dean runs over and grabs the knife that's on the ground by Cass. And Famine's like, okay, T, if you don't want them, I'll have them. And as like the demons Sam exorcised are like, the smoke that comes from the demons is like descending, Famine like plucks them out of the air and sucks them up. And Sam looks at him, and Famine's like, and don't even try to use your powers on me, girly. Like, that's not gonna work on me. And Sam's like, okay, but it'll work on the demons that you just ate. And uses his powers, is like, mind blast! And exorcises all of the souls that Famine just ate. And Sam, like, his nose is bleeding. He looks fucked up. Because I don't remember, does Famine, like, die right now? I think Famine also gets sent to hell.
It doesn't really, because Famine isn't really a demon, so he just gets vaporized. It's not very clear.
So
what
I don't know if
here.
Famine dies. The whole ring thing, I guess, just didn't. Red herring.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, to be honest. You can't kill Famine. You can make him disperse.
Yeah, Famine's out of the picture now. And then suddenly Cass, like, stands up and is like, oh, fuck. Ooh, that's embarrassing. And Dean's sitting there, like, totally upset because, like, twisted because of what Sam just did. We cut. We're at Bobby's place. Bobby's not there, unfortunately. And Dean and Cass are standing in the hallway, and we're outside the panic room that Bobby has in his basement, and you hear Sam, like, screaming and crying out, like, for help, and Cass is like, hey, like, it's gonna be okay. He will be fine. He just needs to get it out of his system. And Dean has, like, some liquor, and he keeps taking sips of it, and Cass is like, hey, like, are you all right? And Dean's like, yeah, I'm fine. I just need some air. And he looks around. He steps outside into the scrapyard, and he leans back against a car and he looks up and he just goes, like, I need some help. I can't do this. I need help. He's praying. And then the episode ends.
It's just a crazy way to end the episode. Like, you're like,
Also, I'm sorry, maybe when every angel around is trying to get to you, maybe praying is not the move.
Like, the vibe is that he's praying to God in that moment, which is also a crazy thing for Chuck to write, considering we have to remind everyone that Chuck is writing this. Yeah. But, like, it's also kind of a dumb move, but it's also very sweet in a way.
It's it's a good writing choice, but is also funny because it's like, come on now. I'm picking it. I'm being too nitpicky. I thought it was a pretty good episode, all things considered.
Yeah.
We got Destiel. We got repressed emotional boys.
We get some good Destiel moments in this, I would say.
And also, I feel like this was one where I was like, it's interesting to, I don't know, I'm a little conflicted about, like, the Sam relapse situation.
Yeah, I agree. It's not really handled with tact either.
And it's also just for shock value.
Yeah, so, it's very like, oh, he's back on the shit again. You're like, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But he gets over it, and I think all things considered, it was a fine episode. I liked a lot of the... I liked how it was presented as well. I just enjoyed it. And I'm sad about that coroner because he was so freaking funny. I want him to be a recurring character. And yeah. And I think it was interesting. I'm interested to see, like, in context, like, where this sets us off for the next episode. And, like, I wonder, I don't remember if they talk about the hashtag relapse again. But I think the idea of Dean finally being able to acknowledge, like, fuck, I am so overwhelmed. It's so over. Like...
that's growth. And the sad part is also that he reaches these points of growth, and then the show was like, never mind.
Yeah.
Granted, you know, healing and recovery are not linear, but it's a little annoying sometimes in this inconsistent show. So...
yeah.
A little bit, in the sense that, in a way.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's those episodes.
Welcome to Team Free Will.
Team Free Will is here. We are here to stay. And I think that we should petition to let us join when they do Supernatural Season 16. I've never said anything bad about this show.
Yeah, I love Warner Brothers. I love
David Zaslav. That's my best friend. But yeah. That's the tea.
Our willingness to sell out is...
yeah. Guys, one thing about us, we love selling out.
We love selling out. You know what Dean Winchester would use? Squarespace.
Shut up.
Thank you all for listening, for bearing with us when we have to be less regular in episodes. Hopefully we can be more regular in episodes coming up. If we ever have a delay or we're skipping a week or something like that, we will post that on our socials. So make sure you're following us on @MysterySpotcast on Blue Sky, Tumblr, Instagram, and TikTok. We'll definitely post on Blue Sky and Instagram if I remember somewhere. You can also ask us cursed supernatural questions in our Tumblr Ask box or by emailing us at themysteryspotcast@gmail.com. If you haven't already, you can please check out Fight for the Future's master list of frontline organizations doing good work that you can support instead of large national organizations. It's listed by issue that you care about, both in the US and abroad. The link is in our show notes, and we encourage you to share it with others. If you enjoyed listening to our very cursed recap, you can rate the show, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a comment on our YouTube channel, and tell a friend about the show. It helps quite a lot. And as you know, now that we've reached season 5, we talk about Destiel a lot. If you have a fic recommendation, we have a form for that you can send it to us in our show notes. We might not talk about it, but it's just for us. It's just if you have a recommendation for us, then we have somewhere for it to go. And we'll see you 2 Tuesdays from now for more slaying people, queerbaiting things, the supernatural business.